Not only is the Prime Minister refusing to extend the windfall tax, she's also choosing to hand the water companies polluting our beaches a tax cut. She's choosing to hand the banks a tax cut. She's choosing to hand the banks a tax cut. Add it all together, and companies that are already doing well are getting a £17 billion tax cut. While working people pay for the cost of living crisis, stroke victims wait an hour for an ambulance, and criminals walk the streets with impunity. Families and public services need every penny they can get. How on earth does she think that now is the right time to protect Shell's profits and give Amazon a tax break?
I'm on the side of people who work hard and do the right thing. That is why we will reverse the national insurance increase, and that is why we will keep corporation tax low. Because ultimately, we want investment right across our country. We want new jobs and new opportunities. And that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims to be breaking orthodoxy, but the reality is she's reheating George Osborne's failed corporation tax plans, protecting oil and gas profits and forcing working people to pay the bill. She's the fourth Tory Prime Minister in 6 years. The face at the top may change, but the story remains the same. There is nothing new about the Tory fantasy of trickle-down economics. Nothing new about this Tory Prime Minister who nodded through every single decision that got us into this mess and now says how terrible it is. And can't she see there's nothing new about a Tory Prime Minister who, when asked who pays, says it's you, the working people of Britain?
Well, there's nothing new about a Labour leader who is calling for more tax rises. It's the same old tax and spend. What I'm about is about reducing taxes, getting our economy growing, getting investment, getting new jobs for people right across the country. I'm afraid to say the right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration. He doesn't understand opportunity. He doesn't understand that people want to keep more of their own money. And that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister. I will take immediate action to help people with their energy bills, but also secure our long-term energy supply. I will take immediate action to make sure we have lower taxes and we grow the economy. And that way, I will ensure we have a positive future for our country and we get Britain moving.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And firstly, can I congratulate my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, for a successful campaign to become our party leader and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, it is right and proper that the government focuses its attention on rising energy costs for households across the country. But as we've heard, businesses big and small are exposed to horrific energy price increases, with no restraint provided by the domestic energy price cap and no support from government so far. For the sake of businesses in West Cornwall and on Scilly, the jobs they provide and the economy as a whole, what can my friend, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, do to ease the energy costs facing our businesses?
Well, my honourable friend is right. We do need to address the issues businesses face, and the package that we will be announcing tomorrow will do just that.
Leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the thoughts and prayers of everyone in this House will be with the families that were caught up in the terrible shooting over recess in Kyle and McCalsh, and indeed in Liverpool as well, and we trust that the families will be fully supported. Mr. Speaker, let me congratulate the Prime Minister and her family on her appointment. But I'm sorry to say that her reputation for straight talking has fallen apart at the first PMQs. After 9 questions, she's still not told us who will pay for her energy plan. Prime Minister, today the public are waiting to find out the response to the economic crisis, and they want answers. So, will the Prime Minister finally answer 2 very simple questions? Will she freeze energy prices at their current levels? And will it be paid for by a windfall tax? Yes or no?
Well, no, it won't be paid for by a windfall tax. I don't believe we can tax our way to growth. And what I want to see is us using more of our UK energy supply, including more oil and gas from the North Sea and nuclear power in Scotland as well. And I hope I can count on the SNP's support for that.
Ian Blackford.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say that on her first full day as Prime Minister, she has failed to rule out.
Shh, let's hear the next question. Ian Blackford.
The Prime Minister may have changed, Mr. Speaker, but it's the same old being shouted down by the Tories. On her first full day as Prime Minister, she's failed to rule out a trust tax on household and businesses, instead of targeting the profits of massive corporations with a windfall tax. The Prime Minister plan appears to be a decade-long raid on the bank accounts of ordinary taxpayers. These costs must not be passed on to consumers and businesses by deferring bills. Government must announce an enhanced windfall profits tax, making sure that those oil and gas producers pay their fair share from excess profits. Does the Prime Minister understand that her first act as Prime Minister will now define her? A trust tax that household and businesses will be paying for years to come.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the Right Honourable Gentleman's position is, because on one hand, he doesn't seem to want oil and gas extraction from the North Sea, and on the other hand, he wants them to pay more taxes. Why does he make up his mind?
Chris Lauder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also warmly welcome my right honourable friend to her seat as Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Scottish Power, Bulb and E.ON, just 3 of many energy suppliers that say they provide 100% renewable electricity. Yet constituents of mine in West Dorset are baffled that the energy regulator allows those prices to rise on par with oil and gas. Would my right honourable friend confirm that she is on the side of the consumer in her energy policy that we'll hear from tomorrow?
I certainly am on the side of consumer, and we need to make sure that we deal with all of the issues in the energy market and the way that energy is regulated. And I will certainly be saying more about this tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister should know by now that many people in the north of Ireland are starving and freezing in their homes. We need a tailored solution for Northern Ireland, but that's much harder to achieve because the DUP are refusing to form a government at Stormont. The new Prime Minister has a choice to make. She can either be on the side of the DUP or on the side of struggling people in Northern Ireland. So whose side is she on?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to work with all of the parties in Northern Ireland to get the Executive and the Assembly back up and running so we can collectively deliver for the people of Northern Ireland. But in order to do that, we do need to fix the issues of the Northern Ireland Protocol, which has damaged the balance between the communities in Northern Ireland. I'm determined to get on with doing that, and I'm determined to work with all parties to find that resolution.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate my right honourable friend and welcome her to her position as the 3rd female. My right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all 3 female Prime Ministers have been Conservative? Well, I thank my right honourable friend for her
fantastic question. I look forward to calling on her advice from her time in office as I start my work as Prime Minister. It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, that there doesn't seem to be the ability in the Labour Party to find a female leader, or indeed a leader who doesn't come from North London. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the issue is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I also congratulate the Prime Minister on her appointment? Mr. Speaker, inflation is at a 40-year high. The NHS is on its knees with 6.6 million people waiting for treatment. Thousands of victims of sexual offences and violent crime are waiting for justice. Not to mention passport delays, a summer of chaos in our airports and our beaches covered in sewage. The Prime Minister has served in every one of the Conservative governments responsible for this mess. So why should the British public trust her to clean up the mess that she's helped create?
I'm determined that we deal with the issues facing us as a nation. We do have problems with our energy supply due to the appalling war being perpetrated by Putin in Ukraine. That is why I will take immediate action to deal with the energy crisis. My Chancellor will take immediate action to reduce taxes and make sure we are growing our economy. And our new Health Secretary, who is also the Deputy Prime Minister, will be taking immediate action to make sure people are able to get appointments with their GP and proper NHS services.
Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
All sides of the House should wish to help the Prime Minister be successful in tackling the problems facing the country. When I raised one of them with the former Prime Minister in July, he said I could talk to the Housing Minister, but the Housing Minister retired after 17 minutes of hearing that. Can I ask the Prime Minister to look to see why the Planning Inspectorate are able to overturn Council's planned protections for green lungs, and will she look at what's happening to the Goring Gap, the A259 in Worthing West and in South Downs constituency, because local councils have no role if they can't protect what matters most to them.
Well, I am a bit concerned about offering the honourable gentleman a meeting with the Housing Minister in case any ill should befall him. But look, my honourable friend is right. There is not enough power in local hands at the moment. It is too easy for local councils to be overruled by the Planning Inspectorate, and that is certainly an issue that I'm expecting my Secretary of State for Housing to look at.
Hannah Bardell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. According to the Prime Minister's new Deputy Prime Minister, one of the things that qualified her most for being PM and was one of her greatest achievements was the reintroduction of beavers. Now, I'm all for the beavers, but given her flip-flopping on Brexit and given her inability to understand global affairs, how can constituents like mine, like Waz Abbas, whose energy prices are going to go from £7,000 to £37,000 a year, or Broadtext in Livingston, who are going to go from £50,000 to £250,000 a month, have any faith that she can tackle the oncoming humanitarian crisis? Is she going to come out of her den in number 10 and take real action, or is she going to be as useless and corrupt as her predecessor, who's rocketed off to somewhere in the Pacific?
Well, I am determined to tackle the issues we face in energy, and I look forward to the Scottish Government playing their part by building new nuclear power stations.
Can I just say, I want a nice apology, that was not a good example. I certainly don't want to use corrupt being used against the new Prime Minister. And I'm sure the honourable member, I'm sure the honourable member will withdraw it. Just withdraw the comment.
Sometimes the truth hurts, but I'm happy to withdraw it.
Pretty sure. Right. Victoria Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I warmly congratulate my right honourable friend. May I welcome her to her place. but may I also wish her the very best in the heavy responsibilities she now bears. Around 1.5 million households across the countryside rely on heating oil in order to keep their homes warm and to cook their meals. They have faced price rises of around 130% in recent months, and they are not part of the energy price cap. As rumours abound about what tomorrow's statement may hold, will my right honourable friend confirm that those 1.5 million households, many of them in rural areas such as my own constituency, will be specifically included in any mooted ideas about an energy price freeze?
Well, my honourable friend is right, and many of my constituents too rely on heating oil for their fuel, and we need to make sure that we are looking after everybody in this very, very difficult winter that we're facing.
Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members may be familiar with the work of Bowness firm Ballantyne's Castings, an iron foundry in operation since the 1820s, which in recent years has done much work around the parliamentary estate. Without the protection of an energy price cap, this specialist SME is witnessing unaffordable costs, with bills rising from £13,000 to £120,000 per month. Heavy energy users face a disproportionate burden and clearly need more support than other businesses. What will the PM do to protect our strategically important and energy-intensive industries?
Well, I very strongly agree with the honourable gentleman that there are strategic industries that we need to make sure who use a lot of energy. We need to do all we can to help them become more energy efficient, but we also need to make sure that they are able to remain competitive in the global marketplace, and that is certainly something the Energy Secretary is looking at in preparing this package.
Dr. Kieran Mullen.
Congratulate the Prime Minister on her appointment and tell her I know my constituents wanted to succeed at a difficult time. Outside of the immediate challenges of energy and inflation, levelling up remains a priority for them. One way to demonstrate her commitment to levelling up would be to choose a town like Crewe to host Great British Railways. Can she ensure that levelling up is at the heart of that decision?
Well, Crewe is, of course, a great railway town. My honourable friend is absolutely right. I'm not going to prejudge the decision that will be made, but what I will be doing as Prime Minister is absolutely focusing on levelling up and making sure we're attracting the investment and growth into parts of this country that have been left behind, so they have their fair share of opportunity.
Alex Davis-Jones.
Mr. Speaker, the new Prime Minister is now finally in post. But make no mistake, she does not have the support of the British public. She can't even rely on the backing of her own MPs. And people in Pontypridd will never forget that she played a key role in a government that failed millions. So will she now finally do the right and decent thing and call a general election?
Mr. Speaker, as a country, we are facing a very serious crisis in energy caused by Putin's war in Ukraine. We are facing...
Order. One of the members for Stoke is getting very carried away. And I know as a former teacher he wants to show better behaviour than he's showing at the moment. Come on, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are facing very serious issues as a country. Partly as a result of the aftermath of COVID, partly as a result of Putin's war in Ukraine. What the British people want is they want a government that's going to sort it out. And that is what I'm determined to do as Prime Minister, sort out the energy crisis, get our economy going, make sure people can get doctor's appointments. That's what I'm focused on.
Nick Fletcher.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate my honourable friend for her position as Prime Minister, but I'd also like to thank her for the support of my campaign to keep Doncaster Sheffield Airport open. Would she now help further right into South Yorkshire Mayor Oliver Coppard and Peel Holdings Chairman John Whittaker to remind them of their powers, duties and responsibilities to the people of South Yorkshire and beyond? And will she use the full weight of her office on these decision makers so as to keep our Doncaster Sheffield Airport open?
Well, regional airports, including the Doncaster-Sheffield Airport, are a vital part of our economic growth. And what I will make sure is that the new Transport Secretary is immediately onto this issue. I know she is, I can tell. Look, she's already contacting the people in Doncaster and Sheffield to make sure we do protect this airport and we protect that vital infrastructure and connectivity that helps our economy grow.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd also like to welcome the Prime Minister to her new post. During her leadership campaign, she said that waiting times for ambulances in her rural Norfolk constituency were appalling. And in North Shropshire, I think many of my constituents would agree with that statement. Across Britain, waiting hours and hours for an ambulance has become normal. But instead of focusing on this problem, a leadership fiasco in the Conservatives have seen 3 health secretaries in 3 months. Will the Prime Minister get a grip on this grave situation and commission the CQC into investigating the causes of and the solutions to the ambulance services delays before a service in crisis faces the additional pressures of an oncoming winter?
People should not have to wait as long as they are for ambulance services, and my new Health Secretary is immediately tackling this issue. She's already laid out her priorities, and sorting out the ambulance service is one of them.
Dame Caroline Downage.
Speaker, can I also very warmly welcome our new Prime Minister to her role and indeed the whole of her front bench. September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and as she knows, cancer is still the biggest killer of children under the age of 14. So I wonder if she could restate her government's commitment to publish a cancer 10-year strategy, but also embedding a childhood cancer mission at its very heart.
Well, Mr. Speaker, cancer is a devastating disease, and it's particularly heartbreaking when children have cancer. And certainly, we will proceed with the strategy that she talks about. And I know our new Health Secretary will do all she can to help those children with cancer.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the theme of children, she will know from her time as Children's Minister that young lungs exposed to cold and damp housing are more likely to fall seriously ill and possibly die. Now, child poverty has been growing during her ministerial time in her different offices. Will she give a solemn pledge and no evasion that there will be no child that will go to bed in a cold, damp house this winter and beyond because the parents cannot afford to put the heating on?
But this is why it's so important that we do tackle the issue of energy, and I will make sure that people are able to afford their energy bills at the same time as dealing with the long-term supply issues to make sure that we are resilient in energy and never get into this position again.
Mr. Speaker, it is the standard practice of the European Union that when they can't get their way in negotiations with the UK, they play for time and wait for a new leader who they hope will have a different view to their predecessor. For the sake of clarity, would my right honourable friend confirm that it is the UK's preferred option to have a negotiated settlement as far as the Northern Ireland Protocol is concerned? But if that is not forthcoming, then we will proceed with the protocol bill that is currently going through Parliament.
Well, first of all, can I thank my right honourable friend for his service as Northern Ireland Secretary. He is absolutely right. We need to resolve the issue of the Northern Ireland Protocol. My preference is for a negotiated solution, but it does have to deliver all of the things we set out in the Northern Ireland Protocol bill. And what we cannot allow is for this situation to drift, because my number one priority is protecting the supremacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Rachel Hopkins.
Speaker, the new Prime Minister tells us she will deliver on the NHS. Well, that's a turn up for the books, because after 12 years of Conservatives driving our NHS into the ground, we have record waiting lists, people dying in outside A&E, and nurses using food banks. So given the Prime Minister Minister has served in the past 3 Conservative governments on that watch. Can she explain why we should trust her to deliver?
I mean, I don't agree with the way she is talking down our National Health Service. The fact is that our health service did brilliantly in tackling COVID, in delivering the vaccine rollout, and in getting this country back on its feet. But we do face challenges now with the backlog following COVID. And this is why the new Health Secretary is going to work to address those challenges.
Derby Wright.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my right honourable friend on her appointment and recognise her determination to address the many urgent and difficult challenges that face us now. But would she accept that one of those challenges is an almost entirely unregulated online space? And would she accept too that no responsible government can avoid the need for excellent, balanced, sensible regulation in this space? And would she therefore assure me that the online safety bill will come back to this House swiftly for us to consider further and amend if necessary?
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that we will be proceeding with the online safety bill. There are some issues that we need to deal with. What I want to make sure is that we protect the under-18s from harm, but we also make sure free speech is allowed. So there may be some tweaks required, but certainly he is right that we need to protect people's safety online.
Ella Days.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has been part of a government for the past 12 years, which has been systematically letting down the most vulnerable children in the country. The independent review of children's social care, published by the government in May, describes the system as in need of a total reset. The Prime Minister has said she wants to deliver. Will she make a cast-iron commitment to deliver for our country's most vulnerable children and publish the government's response to the independent review and an action plan for delivery before the end of the year? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to congratulate my right honourable friend and her whole front bench and wish them every success in the new government. I'd particularly like to thank my right honourable friend for her steadfast commitment to support for the earliest years throughout the 12 years that she and I have worked together for 3 previous Prime Ministers. So can I ask her now to renew her commitment to rolling out the Best Start for Life to give every baby the best chance at leading a fulfilling life?
Prime Minister.
My right honourable friend has done such a fantastic job championing this issue, developing the policies, and I am committed to following through and delivering for children, because what we know is intervening early, helping children early is the best way to help those children have a successful childhood and ultimately a fulfilled life.
That ends PMQs.
To the new government and Keir Starmer taking on Liz Truss over the energy situation and in detail who's going to pay for it, because we understand that the new cabinet this morning did discuss the energy plan. The details will be outlined tomorrow. But Sir Keir Starmer saying that she was reheating George Osborne's failed corporation tax plans, protecting oil and gas profits and forcing working people to pay the bill.
And I think this is going to be the dividing line. There is total consensus about the need to freeze energy prices, but it is who's going to pay for it. So Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, pointed out or suggested that the energy producers, oil and gas companies, are making £170 billion in excess
Yeah, and he
profits.
indicated that was Treasury estimates that had come up with that
Indeed.
figure.
And she came back and said the way to get investment is not to tax big companies, not to tax anybody, really. But I did have one observation about her style, actually.
For transport.
I thought she was very sure-footed. I thought that her self-belief, and anybody who wants the top job needs that self-belief.
And we saw that, and that answer where she said yes or no, yes.
So she has that self-belief. It was a sure-footed performance. It was a very different style to that, the flamboyant style that we've become accustomed to with Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
It was far more no-nonsense.
Clearly, what will be, as you said, the main issue now is how Sir Keir Starmer carries on this attack on what he said was nothing new about the Tory fantasy of trickle-down economics, nothing new about this new Tory Prime Minister who nodded through every decision that got us into this mess. And that is a problem, of course, in that she has been members of these Tory governments now for 12 years, and we heard it about the NHS as well. It's going to be difficult to actually move away from the blame game, if you like.
Yes, she's been an MP since 2010. She was in David Cameron's cabinet.
Yep.
Do you know the only survivor from David Cameron's cabinet?
It's Liz Truss.
It is indeed.
Wow, there we are.
Liz Truss. But I thought a very sure-footed performance from Liz Truss.
But clearly,
the politics,
we've got
the dividing lines
the dividing lines,
there.
yes, they're actually defined already. Well, let's get some reaction now. Waiting for us at College Green, Westminster, Labour MP Rosie Duffield, Conservative MP Andrew Morrison. And Rosie, I'm hoping we can start with you because we did have that problem with your microphone. Hopefully that's all been sorted out for you and you managed to dry out a bit in that pouring rain down there. What did you make of Sir Keir Starmer attack on this trickle-down economics issue?
I thought that was a really good line. We haven't heard that phrase for a really long time. It used to be bandied about all over the place under the Thatcher government. And we know, as Labour, that trickle-down only works for those at the very top, supposedly doing the trickling, and those at the bottom do not benefit at all. So I think it was really good that he revived that, and it will help people to understand exactly what this model that Liz Truss seems to be pursuing is.
When he's talking about Treasury estimates, saying about the 170 billion excess profits, as he called them, from the oil and gas companies in the next 2 years, that's going to be very difficult to argue against when people look at what they may have to pay over the next 5 to 10 years for this energy system.
Absolutely. I think most people watching PMQs today had those two themes on their mind, which is what Keir Starmer and the rest of the Labour benches were talking about, and that is the energy crisis, the cost of living, child poverty, you know, all of that, and the NHS as well came up, didn't it? And I think that's what people at home just want to hear answers to, and hopefully we'll get some tomorrow.
Fair charge that the Labour leader made that this is a Conservative Prime Minister who believes in trickle-down economics, that the rich, if you enable wealth, enable companies to keep more of their wealth, rich people to keep more of their wealth, then it will eventually trickle down to those with less.
We know that doesn't work, though, don't we? It never benefits. It just creates a more divided society of haves and have-nots, and we've had enough of that. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, the first thing I took away from listening to what was going on College Green was the support from my benches for Liz Truss. You asked me earlier on about unity. Well, I think we got the answer very volubly just now. The point about taxes, even if you were to remove all the green levies, and the so-called windfall tax levied on, we're not quite sure who, then even best case, that's going to take just a very few percentage points off people's energy bills. What people at home want to know is what they're going to have to write a cheque for. That's what my constituents want. And so far, the Conservative proposals, so far as we know them in advance for tomorrow, really knock the spots off the Labour ones. So that's what people will feel at home. That's really what I'm primarily interested in. But if you want to know my view on tax, my chief concern isn't the corporations. My chief concern are small and medium-sized businesses of the sort I have a lot of in my constituency, and I'm really looking forward to tomorrow to find out what's going to keep their head above water in terms of how we can mitigate this extraordinary bow wave of energy cost that's going to hit them towards the end of the year.
But a key question clearly about how we're going to pay for it and who is going to pay for it. And do you share maybe our analysis that this will make the main division between the two parties now as to how you actually pay that bill?
Well, Labour will try to confect that, of course, and I have no philosophical objection to windfall taxes. Margaret Thatcher, remember, introduced them in the early 1980s on banks, so that's fine, and Rishi Sunak had that as part of his proposition. But I think what's important is to actually look at the figures, realistic figures, realise who you can actually tax with your windfall tax, depends which jurisdiction companies are in, distinguish between distributors and producers, obviously, and make sure you incentivise producers to frankly get pumping. You know, we need more hydrocarbons, bluntly, because this is a very serious problem that's largely beyond our control in relation to Ukraine. We do have an indigenous supply that can be increased, and the Prime Minister's quite right to say this is a short and long-term problem. We can't simply do firefighting. That is just simply to address what's going to happen this winter. We need to know what's going to happen next winter, the winter after that, and the winter after that, and in 10 years' time.
Saw a former Prime Minister on her feet today. No, not Boris Johnson, but Theresa May. She congratulated the third Conservative female Prime Minister. Did that make you cringe a bit, Rosie, as a feminist Labour MP who has never, who is in a party that has never elected a female leader, let alone Prime Minister?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked earlier about the diversity, and of course Liz Truss made a great thing of that and said that, you know, all our leaders come from North London. I mean, I can't really argue with that. She's got a point. It is about time we had a woman leader, and I voted for one.
What do you think Sir Keir Starmer will be reflecting on now? What, you know, it was quite a feisty exchange, and I'm just looking at what she shot back at him. There's nothing new about a Labour leader asking for more taxes, the same old tax and spend. He doesn't understand aspiration. That may have stung.
I think they were quite evenly matched today, weren't they? And I think we saw them both give as good as they got. And he'll certainly be going back with his team and reflecting on her style and trying to sort of anticipate it for each coming week. And it's very different, like you said, to Boris and his flamboyant kind of off-script answers and humour. And I guess we'll see her develop into the role. But I think it'll be really interesting to see how they take PMQs from now on. But you know, I think Keir said what we're all thinking, or certainly on my side. I think he did a really good job, but she came back really strongly, I think.
Morrison, Boris Johnson wasn't on the backbenches today. Would you like to see him on the backbenches? What sort of former Prime Minister would you like to see Boris Johnson become?
Look, I thoroughly approve of former Prime Ministers sticking with it and staying in the House of Commons. You know, I salute Theresa May for staying in the Commons. That shows real dedication, and it can't be easy. So I hope very much Boris Johnson, who has enormous talents and, of course, experience in office, I look forward to him making a really active contribution to our politics in general, and specifically, I hope, in the House of Commons. I'd be very sorry to see him go.
And in terms of where we go from now, I mean, interesting that we saw Penny Mordaunt there, very sort of obvious as now Leader of the Commons. We've got Therese Coffey obviously being seen alongside Liz Truss at all times, James Cleverly. Is this going to be a sort of collegiate approach, do you think, from now on?
I think it will be collegiate. I mean, one of the features of this cabinet is they are close associates of the Prime Minister. So she's made that decision. That does mean that the Cabinet will be collegiate, but I hope it's also outward-looking. So I hope it engages all of my colleagues and that we all feel part of the team, because if we don't, I think there are problems. And can I just say that I particularly welcome the appointment of Penny Mordaunt as Leader of the House. I think that's a very wise move. She's widely liked in the House, on both sides, I think, and she will certainly make a very good job of being leader. I have no doubt about that at all. And in terms of style, you're right. I mean, Boris was unique, wasn't he? But Liz Truss is very different. I personally welcome the more workmanlike approach of Liz Truss after the theatre of Boris Johnson at Dispatch Box. But we'll have to see how this shakes down as we go through PMQs and how Keir Starmer faces up to the challenge of facing the third Prime Minister, third female Prime Minister, of course, all Conservatives, which, of course, is going to be a standing rebuke to the Labour Party.
just pick up, though, on one thing, what you said there about Penny Mordaunt. I mean, is it actually a bit of a non-job politically? Very important in terms of an admin role, but it's not a very sort of glamorous job as such, is it?
I'm not sure. I mean, you're right to say that business questions, the big set-piece event for the Leader of the House on Thursday, sometimes there's a one-night whip on a Thursday, so members tend to drift away. But I think it's great for getting alongside colleagues. And I think that will not be lost on Penny. And she will be extremely good, because she is very good at this, in getting alongside colleagues and taking them along. The whole point about being Leader of the House is you cover all the portfolios pretty much. So your knowledge has to be pretty comprehensive. And in terms of engaging, encouraging members, I don't think there's a better position, short of being Prime Minister, for somebody who wishes to do that with colleagues. So it's a communication job, and Penny's very good at that.
And Rosie Duffield, I wondered if you wanted to extend a bit of sisterly solidarity to the new Deputy Prime Minister, the new Health Secretary, Therese Coffey, who is having a bit of a hard time on Twitter. People are mocking her because she's not as slim as she might be. They're saying she likes to drink. The media using pictures of her smoking a cigar. Actually, we always say we want human politicians. She's displaying very human characteristics, and she's been getting a bit of a tough time for it. Rosie?
Yeah, absolutely. I doubt very much we'd see the same treatment and the same sort of attention to appearance as we do for a female politician, particularly in that health role. And, you know, Therese Coffey's well known for being up for a bit of fun and very relaxed and fun-loving. But, you know, it doesn't mean that she can't do her job and take it very seriously any more than, you know, any less than a man in that role. So it is a bit tedious seeing those kind of comments. I mean, by all means, let's criticise her on all of the things that we need her to do if she doesn't deliver. But let's not sort of make it about her appearance. I think that's kind of pretty boring and old-fashioned, really.
Yeah, and obviously performance at the dispatch box is very important. But last thought to you, Rosie, how long do you think we've got before a general election? I mean, clearly at the moment, Labour 46 to 29 points, a substantial lead over the Tories, but there may be a bit of a honeymoon period for the moment. Are you expecting to have to go to the country within, what, 18 months or less?
No, we haven't got that long until we have to have a general election. And if I were Liz Truss, I'd want to go as long as possible. She's got to bed in. She's got to get used to her role. She wants to make some changes and some differences. I think she'd be a bit bonkers going to the country now, to be honest, when she's got the role that she's wanted for so long. So I doubt very much we'll be going earlier than 2024, personally.
Labour's Rosie Duffield and the Conservatives' Andrew Morrison. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis and thoughts on Liz Truss's first Prime Minister's questions. Thank you.
Are we going to score them? I think five out of 10 each.
Yeah, I think it was evenly matched.
Yeah, honours even. Well, that is Liz Truss's first PMQs, setting up her first day as Prime Minister, revealing the new energy plan in detail tomorrow, though we understand the Cabinet has discussed it this morning.
Many of the issues faced by her new government, from inflation to strikes, being the same as those faced in the 80s. She could be looking to Margaret Thatcher for solutions. Well, our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has been taking a look at all of that.
The saying, there is nothing new in this world, is oh so true. Strikes, energy costs and inflation on everyday goods such as food. Liz Truss has a massive hill to climb, and people like Colin Blythe, who's a manufacturer, is finding it hard to get staff and sees very little reward for the pressure of business.
There's not a lot of hands-on guys anymore. Nobody wants to be hands-on. There just seems to be this thing. It's taught into them. You can make your money, you know, without actually working for it. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of worry, a lot of things that people only see a big place to see whatever. They don't see the stress, the strain, the hours, after hours work you have to put in to run a business.
Michael Deans is a top restaurateur and is watching his outgoings double.
Our last electric bill was £15,000 for this site, which is 3 restaurants, as you know. It was 6,000 this time 6 months ago. So it's more than doubled, and then we haven't even looked at the gas yet. Labour cost is up, everything is up.
So while those that create employment are finding it tough, the employed are facing the same, and Erin Massey and Jordan Bryce of the CWU are on strike.
We need to have a fair pay raise. We need to be brought up to the standard of living. We're facing the same crisis that everybody else is facing. We've got bills to pay, mortgages to pay, rents to pay, children to rear, and we're finding it hard. Our members are struggling.
If I stayed at home and was a carer, I could earn more money. That's the reality.
There is no doubt that any period in time can be compared. Right now, it could be argued we're living between 78 and 84. Back then, Margaret Thatcher took on the unions and exported our manufacturing. Except for here. This concrete road was the road for her venture with a flamboyant American by the name of John DeLorean. Thatcher's bold step to fund a multi-million-pound factory in a financial storm was seen as daring, converting a greenfield site in just 2 years. DeLorean, of course, failed commercially. Recessions in the United States and on a worldwide scale ended up killing the company. The vehicle itself, though, did find its iconic future as a time-travelling capsule. Imagine if we had one right now, where we could go to the future. David Mathers is a DeLorean owner whose vehicle is complete with its own movie flux capacitor. David, tell us what happens when this DeLorean gets up to 88.8 miles per hour.
3 penalty points and a £60 fine.
Liz Truss has so much to get done in so little time and must build more than a Hollywood dream. Dougie BD, GB News.
That is still a handsome car, isn't it? Made out of stainless steel, so they don't rust if you wanted to have a car that kept going for a while.
Yeah, it's a handsome
if you
car.
can afford the petrol to put in it. Let's just bring you some breaking news on the politics, of course, with PMQs just having finished. Already things are happening because we are now being told that the proposed Bill of Rights aimed at replacing the Human Rights Act has actually been shelved by the Liz Truss government. Now, just to remind you, this was something that had been championed by the former Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, who has been kicked out of government, a high-profile casualty, as they called him. So the Bill of Rights bill was due to have its first reading, its first test on September the 12th, but a government source saying it is now unlikely to progress in its current form.
I think when you are a new Prime Minister, you can't have a number of priorities. And I think the way you set things out now, you're really setting out what you want the country. First impressions count.
Yeah, and
I just think
it's
you
emergency stuff,
You
I guess,
can't
isn't it?
fight on loads of fronts. I don't think it's shelved forever. Just in its
get the economy fixed, get the energy situation fixed, and take everything else on a bit later. Yeah.
Coming up, we'll be getting the verdict on Liz Truss's first PMQs as Prime Minister from our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, and we'll be discussing Chelsea pulling the plug on Thomas Tuchel's reign. Before that, it's a short break.
Hello there, welcome to your latest broadcast. I'm Greg Dewhurst. Through Wednesday, it's another day of sunny spells and heavy showers across the UK. Some hail, some thunder, gusty winds at times too. The reason for this is low pressure is still in charge of the weather across the UK, swirling these showers around, some of them really hefty at times. But that low pressure not going anywhere quickly over the next few days. Through the rest of Wednesday, we have sunshine and showers across much of the UK. Some of these showers will be heavy at times, the risk of hail, thunder, gusty winds, reduced visibility if travelling on the roads as well. But in between, there will be some sunny spells. It will feel quite warm in the sunshine, quite humid as well, particularly in the east. Highs generally the low 20s, 24 a high in the southeast. Further showers pushing through the rest of Wednesday evening, perhaps bunching together to give some longer spells of rain across parts of Wales, southwest England, and then later on across southeast England into East Anglia too. Some rumbles of thunder continuing overnight. In between, some clear skies, but warm and humid again for everyone, 14 or 15, generally as a low. So a showery start to Thursday morning. More of the same to come. Sunshine and showers through the day. Perhaps some thicker cloud across eastern England at times, giving some showery rain here, and also some hefty downpours across parts of Scotland. In between, there will be some sunny spells, but again, the risk of hail, thunder, gusty winds associated with these showers. Temperatures on the whole generally getting into the low 20s, 23, 24 as a high in the best of the sunshine. Through the evening time, some heavier rain, persistent rain pushing into northeast England, southern Scotland, some gusty winds associated with this too. Elsewhere, generally seeing some showers, but perhaps some clearer skies developing later on across the Midlands, across into Northern Ireland. To end the week and into the weekend, more of the same. Sunshine and showers, though perhaps coming a little bit drier with more in the way of sunshine around.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio, and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the second hour of GB Newsday with me, Gloria De Piero.
And me, Mark Longhurst, where we're continuing the reaction to our new Prime Minister Liz Truss and her first PMQs. We'll have the reaction of Tory MP Theresa Villiers in a moment. But first, let's get the very latest news headlines with Rosie.
A very good afternoon to you. It's just 1 minute past 1. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Liz Truss has confirmed a package of support will be announced tomorrow to help people deal with rising energy prices. During her first Prime Minister's questions, she reiterated her position on a windfall tax, saying it's the wrong time to discourage companies from investing in the UK. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused her of protecting the profits of Shell and giving Amazon a tax break rather than helping families and public services.
The Prime Minister knows she's no choice but to back an energy price freeze. But it won't be cheap, and the real choice, the political choice, is who is going to pay. Is she really telling us that she's going to leave these vast excess profits on the table and make working people foot the bill for decades to come?
Well, I understand that people across our country are struggling with the cost of living and they're struggling with their energy bills. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, will take immediate action to help people with the cost of their energy bills, and I will be making an announcement to this House on that tomorrow, and giving people certainty to make sure that they are able to get through this winter and be able to have the energy supplies and be able to afford it.
Well, former Prime Minister Theresa May also took the opportunity to throw in a light-hearted question.
Can I ask my right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all 3 female prime ministers have been Conservative?
My right honourable friend for her fantastic question. I look forward to calling on her advice from her time in office as I start my work as Prime Minister. It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, that there doesn't seem to be the ability in the Labour Party to find a female leader, or indeed a leader who doesn't come from North London. Yeah.
To some other news now. The former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's obviously disappointed that he has to face a retrial. Well, the judge's decision comes after a jury failed to reach a verdict in his domestic violence case last week. The 48-year-old denies controlling or coercive behaviour against his former girlfriend, Kate Greville. The new trial date has been set for July next year. 4 men arrested in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have been released on bail. The 9-year-old was shot in her home last month. Her mother, who was also injured by the gunman, has told those responsible they need to own up. In a video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside Police, Cheryl Corbell paid tribute to her daughter.
You know you've done wrong, so you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
GBNews sources say more than 5,000 Albanians are gathering in northwestern France, preparing to cross the Channel. They're expected to attempt the journey in the coming days and are waiting for the weather to improve. Authorities are warning that crime gangs seem increasingly prepared to risk people's lives by pushing unseaworthy boats into the water in rough conditions. Almost 28,000 people have been intercepted crossing the Channel so far this year. Prince Charles will meet the parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction as he hosts a global conference on allergies. The event was organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, set up by the parents of 15-year-old Natasha. She died following a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a Pret sandwich during a flight to France in 2016. The TUC is warning the new Prime Minister not to weaken workers' rights, or they'll take her to court. Liz Truss is being told she'll face huge resistance if she tries to make it more difficult to strike or change working hours, sick pay or health and safety legislation. You're now up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to Newsday.
Welcome back. Let's continue today's coverage of Liz Truss's first Prime Minister's Question Time. Theresa Villiers, the former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Conservative MP for Chipping Barnet, joins us now. Good to see you, Theresa Villiers. The dividing lines in politics are clear. The consensus is that there has to be an energy price freeze. The question is, who should pay for it? The argument from Labour being that it should be the energy, the oil and the gas companies from their excess profits. What's your view, Theresa Villiers?
Well, I think it's vital that we get help to households and to businesses at this time of energy price crisis. I think we will hear in more detail tomorrow how that will all be funded. But I would highlight that we have a progressive tax system, so business and higher income earners are already contributing significantly to that tax system, and we already have, to some degree, a windfall tax in place. So I think the lines are perhaps a little more blurred than your question might suggest.
Doesn't seem to think that, does it? It's a Treasury estimate that Sir Keir Starmer quoted, 170 billion over 2 years of excess profits.
And yeah, I know that we will find out more tomorrow exactly how this will all be funded. It's frankly difficult for me to give you a detailed answer because like the rest of the world, I haven't seen the announcement, and I don't believe in prejudging things before I've actually read them, but I know that a top priority for the Prime Minister is to deliver help with energy bills, and she's going to do that within a day of taking office. I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, obviously taking on board what you say about the detail, but there is a principle here at stake. And when we look at Germany, they are seemingly quite happy to impose a windfall tax on their power suppliers and the oil companies and so on to actually help out in terms of the energy bills. Why is Liz Truss so reluctant to do that?
Well, as I say, we already have imposed a windfall tax. And even before that windfall tax was imposed a few months ago to help support the package of help with energy prices that's already in place, even before that, many of our energy producers were paying an additional rate of corporation tax anyway. So as I say, it's not a clear black and white division between those who believe in windfall taxes and those who don't. It's a debate about the extent to which the share how we should divide the cost of the intervention that's going to be announced tomorrow.
Indeed. But if the energy price freeze is paid for by a massive increase in borrowing, wouldn't that worry you? She says she's from the Thatcherite tradition. That's not Thatcherite, is it?
Clearly, whatever is announced tomorrow will have to be carefully scrutinised in terms of its impact on the public finances. But we are in an emergency, and in those circumstances, unfortunately, borrowing levels inevitably do go up. I think it's worth bearing in mind that, to a large degree, this crisis is caused by the war in Ukraine and the aggression of Vladimir Putin. You know, when one is on a war footing, you have to take difficult steps, but I'm sure the Prime Minister will be looking carefully at the numbers to try and ensure that she does everything she possibly can to do this in a responsible way, which minimises the impact on the public finances. But in an emergency of this scale, there will be an impact on the public finances, and it will be negative, but we can come through this.
What did you make of PMQs, the first PMQs for Liz Truss? I mean, we remember that phrase, Punch and Judy politics. I mean, it was pretty feisty, and clearly the dividing lines have been drawn already. But how would you mark her in terms of her performance?
Well, I thought she was excellent, because of course, and that's really not surprising, because she's had 10 years of experience at the dispatch box. She's always been confident in the dispatch box. She's got a sharp wit, and she took it all in her stride. It was as if she'd been doing PMQs for years, not debuting after being appointed by the Queen at Balmoral only yesterday.
And final question. In her victory speech when she was elected on Monday, she said she would use, I quote, all the fantastic talents across our party. When you look at the cabinet, perhaps she thinks that all the fantastic talents just happened to vote for Liz Truss and not Rishi Sunak.
Well, I mean, I think any Prime Minister needs, that has particular supporters that she wants around her in senior roles. And I think she's appointed a cabinet who are immensely talented. And so I really wish them well. And there's a range of ministerial posts which will be announced over the coming days, and I feel confident that there'll be a few Rishi supporters in there. I'm not hanging by the phone myself on all of this, but I'm sure the talents across the party will be recognised.
Well, a little unfair of us to ask, but we were going to maybe suggest, as a former Secretary of State, of course, I mean, would you like to have the phone ringing?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that question.
I was just saying that you are a former Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Bearing in mind what you've just said, would you like it if the phone did ring and you were offered something?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's always great to make a comeback in politics. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think it's likely this time round. Maybe in the future. Who knows what that will hold?
It's always great to have you on the channel. Always great to speak to you, Theresa Villiers, Conservative MP for Chipping Barnet. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Of course, more political reaction to come. Liz Truss facing her first PMQs, of course, clashing with Keir Starmer on tax, the cost of living, but confirming that there would be an energy plan announcement tomorrow, Thursday. So let's take a look at a couple of the key moments from PMQs from earlier.
When she said in her leadership campaign that she was against windfall taxes, did she mean it?
I am against a windfall tax. I believe it is the wrong thing to be putting companies off investing in the United Kingdom just when we need to be growing the economy.
Mr Speaker, thank you for that answer. I ask because the Treasury estimates are that the energy producers will make £170 billion in excess profits over the next 2 years. The Prime Minister knows she's no choice but to back an energy price freeze. But it won't be cheap, and the real choice, the political choice, is who is going to pay. Is she really telling us that she's going to leave these vast excess profits on the table and make working people foot the bill for decades to come?
Well, I understand that people across our country are struggling with the cost of living and they're struggling with their energy bills. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, will take immediate action to help people with the cost of their energy bills. And I will be making an announcement to this House on that tomorrow and giving people certainty to make sure that they are able to get through this winter and be able to have the energy supplies and be able to afford it. But we can't just deal with today's problem. We can't just put a sticking plaster on it. What we need to do is increase our energy supplies long term. And that is why we will open up more supply in the North Sea, which the Honourable Gentleman has opposed. That is why we will build more nuclear power stations, which the Labour Party didn't do when they were in office. And that is why we will get on with delivering the supply as well as helping people through the winter.
And that was Liz Truss's first Prime Minister's Question Time. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, was watching. He is in Downing Street for us. What stood out for you? What were the key takeaways for you, Darren McCaffrey?
What I think was really interesting, Gloria, was that in many ways it was actually a very assured performance by Liz Truss, pretty confident performance. Now, she has been a cabinet minister for quite a long time. She's used to standing at that dispatch box, so maybe it's not massively a surprise, but PMQs is a whole different level, and I think she did pretty well today. She was pretty pleased with how she did. She provided pretty short, pithy answers, sometimes quite effective answers at times to Labour's point. But the thing I will take away most is not necessarily that it was a much duller affair than you'd normally get with Boris Johnson in that seat, but then again, maybe actually voters would like to see a rather duller affair, but rather that we are really seeing these really stark lines between Labour and the Conservatives, not simply based on personality that we've seen in the last couple of months and years between Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, but actually on ideological issues too, about precisely who's going to pay for that price freeze on the energy cap that we're likely to see announced tomorrow, on things like the windfall tax, and also just on the big economic issues of the day. Fundamentally, as Liz Truss herself pointed out, Labour want to see public finances well financed through taxation. It's clear that Liz Truss wants to cut taxes, even potentially if that means cutting public spending as well. So we're seeing really sharp ideological lines in politics, a real choice essentially from voters.
And clearly, with the details of this energy plan likely to come out in the Commons tomorrow, I suspect we'll probably see more from Sir Keir Starmer pushing this idea of who actually pays for the bailout. Is it the energy companies or is it us, the taxpayers?
Indeed, there were kind of three big ways that you could pay for all of this. Clearly, Labour think a large portion of it should come from those energy companies. We heard Sir Keir Starmer talk about the fact that they're making £170 billion, it's predicted, in excess profits over the next 2 years. He thinks, as you've rightly pointed out, as other European countries think, that they should pick up that bill. Now, clearly the Conservative Party feel that is unfair in the sense that it could damage investment here in Britain. Though it must be said, it is interesting that this afternoon Downing Street were asked the question whether they're going to scrap the windfall tax that Rishi Sunak introduced in the spring. They are not. That is going to go ahead. The second option is that you do this by spreading the bills out, if you like, over a very long period of time. So ultimately, in the end, we do all end up paying for this just over the next 10, 20 years. So you're trying even out that rather steep curve that we're likely to see in bills in the months to come. Or the third option, which ultimately still comes back to us really, is through long-term borrowing. Now, what option are they going to go for? Well, we've heard speculation and rumours, actually, that it could be any one or a combination of the latter two. But in the end, this is a really, really interesting political battle because Labour feel that they've got public opinion behind them on this. They look at the polls and they see that the public are massively in favour of more windfall tax. They think the argument that putting all this on working families at a time they're already struggling is just not going to really wash with the public. Liz Truss thinks that actually this is a proper dividing line where she feels that people do not want to see further tax increases, whether it's on corporations or indeed on individuals. And it is going to be a proper battle in the days and weeks to come. The question is who's going to win that battle, and I think public opinion will be key to all of this. And that is why, even though Keir Starmer wasn't, I would have thought, as effective today as he should be, he feels he's on a surer footing because he thinks he's got public opinion behind him.
Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, thank you for your analysis there. We'll speak to you later, no doubt.
Well, Prince Charles today meeting the parents of that 15-year-old girl who died after an allergic reaction caused by a pret-a-manger sandwich.
The Prince is hosting a two-day symposium on allergies at Dumfries House in Ayrshire. It's been organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, which was set up by the parents of Natasha Ednan Laparaus.
Well, the Prince of Wales saying that previously he had been deeply moved by the teenager's death. Our GB News royal reporter Cameron Walker joining us in the studio. And Cameron, of course, you dried out after being up at Balmoral yesterday. The issue for the Prince here seems to be quite a personal one, as well as in terms of supporting the charity itself.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It's definitely a story which is close to the Prince's heart. So this concerns Natasha Ednan Laparaus, who, as you said, died tragically in 2015 after eating a pret-a-manger baguette before going onto an aeroplane. Now, the coroner concluded in the 2018 inquest that she would not have eaten this baguette if she knew it contained sesame seeds, and she was very severely allergic to sesame seeds. And on the Pret label, it didn't list it as an ingredient. There has been a law change since then, but in response to all of this, her parents, Natasha's parents, set up this foundation, which today has organised this roundtable between allergy experts from all across the world. But the idea of bringing these allergy experts all together in one room was actually Prince Charles's. It was his idea, highlighting the growing allergy epidemic, particularly among children and young people. And he said in a statement that he was moved beyond words by Natasha's death, the way her parents have selflessly dedicated themselves to preventing other families suffering in the same way. And I think this plays on perhaps the Prince of Wales's great strengths, perhaps as the heir to the throne. He has this ability, this influence on people around the world to gather people in one place, experts. It perhaps shows how the royal family can do good for Britain as well in finding solutions to allergies, and obviously raises awareness of the dangers.
And unafraid to be active in these roles as well, because clearly that's a discussion to be had for a new approach for the ruler of a country. You know, how political with a small p do you be?
It certainly is, and it's a very fine line for the royal family, particularly Charles as the future king, the next king, of not being seen as too political. I think his role today will be very much as a host, listening to the different sides of the story rather than actively trying to pursue a certain policy or a certain policy even, or a certain line of scientific inquiry. But it does raise awareness. But just Pret has been kind of approached for comments on this particular roundtable that's happening today. They haven't responded as yet, but at the time of the inquest, they did say it was they were deeply sorry for Natasha's death.
And just moving on to the Queen, it was great to see her yesterday. I think it's the first time we've seen her for 46 or 47 days.
Since July, yes.
Yes, indeed. Now, she has sent a message of condolence to the people of Canada following the recent stabbings there. Just tell us about that?
Yeah, she has. So this is after the series of stabbings, as you said, which has killed 10 people in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll get my words correct. So Her Majesty said, "I would like to extend my condolences to those who have lost loved ones in the attacks that occurred this past weekend in Saskatchewan. My thoughts and prayers are with those recovering from injuries and grieving such horrific losses. I mourn with all Canadians at this tragic time." Of course, Her Majesty the Queen is Queen of Canada as well as the United Kingdom. It's one of 15 realms that she remains head of state around the world. And her grandson, actually, the Duke of Cambridge, released a very similar statement yesterday via Twitter, a more modern way than releasing a statement via the Palace Communications team. And he describes it, Prince William describes the attacks as truly heartbreaking.
Yeah. Do we know how long she's likely to remain up at Balmoral? As we say, we saw that picture of her with a walking stick, but seemingly to be quite engaged, should we say, to be involved in all of the processes of state up there. I mean, is she likely to stay for a continued time up there?
Yeah, well, she's been up there for her traditional summer break, and we are expecting her perhaps to move back from Balmoral back to Windsor Castle in early October. Like you said, that she seemed very, very engaged. She was very kind of smiling in those photographs we saw, but she was using a walking stick, and she perhaps was showing her age, the fact she is 96 years old. We know she has what the palace describe as episodic mobility problems, and I think to your right, that means she has good days and bad days with her movement.
Yeah.
Cameron, thank
Cameron,
you.
lovely. Thank you very much
Thanks
indeed.
The new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, has promised businesses and hard-working families that he will support them in the face of rising costs. We'll be asking how. Before that, it's time to look at your weather.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
So a day of firsts for Liz Truss as new Prime Minister, leading her inaugural cabinet meeting this morning and then going toe-to-toe with Sir Keir Starmer in her first PMQs in the House of Commons.
The new Prime Minister confirmed a plan to tackle rising energy bills will be announced tomorrow. The man tasked with the job of leading the country through choppy economic waters is former Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng.
Well, he's been meeting business leaders today and tweeted this picture saying that he'd set out immediate support for families and businesses to tackle the cost of living. Other cabinet appointments, including Jacob Rees-Mogg as business secretary, who'll be looking after energy directly, Chloe Smith in work and pensions, and Kemi Badenoch now in charge of trade.
Joining us to talk about Liz Truss's economic cabinet appointments and what her government will do tomorrow on those energy bills is GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan. Liam, tomorrow is the day when the whole nation should be put at ease. There's going to be an energy price freeze, right?
Yeah, and there will be some umbrage that it's taken this long with 7 weeks of Tory leadership contest, given many households and businesses have been scratching their heads, losing sleep, not investing, changing their plans because they don't know how they're going to solve their bills. What seems clear is that we're going to go back to the April 2022 Ofgem energy price cap, so around £2,000 at most, as I understand it, for the typical household utility bill. So that 80% rise in the Ofgem energy price cap from October, which we've been discussing on GB News for weeks, to £3,500, scrap that. That's not going to happen. In addition, there's the £400 for all households that Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, previously announced, and also an extra £650 for more vulnerable households in receipt of certain benefits that's already been announced. The status of those two aspects we'll have to wait for tomorrow. But I think what's also important is that it is clear from that Kwasi Kwarteng tweet and from discussions I've had with cabinet ministers on my WhatsApp and so on, that there will be a significant package for businesses. Now, some people say, oh, why does business need any help? Look, there are thousands, tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in particular across the country that would simply go bust if they had to be exposed to the full force of this increase in wholesale energy prices. Why? Because they don't have any protection from that Ofgem energy price cap. We featured businesses here on GB News that are facing 5-fold, 10-fold increases in their energy bills. And I know, Gloria, it won't have escaped your attention that many of these businesses are in those red wall seats. They're manufacturers, they're steel makers, they're small family-run energy-intensive businesses in the Midlands, in the North. They are politically absolutely strategic. And ministers just don't have a choice but to extend this package to business.
Big question, how much is the bill going to be and who pays it and how we pay it?
The bill is open-ended, Mark, in the sense that if you freeze energy at a certain level, wherever wholesale prices are going to go, you have to pay the difference.
Yeah, £6,000 was the price cap figure suggested for January, wasn't it?
That's right. And, you know, I've been reading many economists, listening to them in the last few hours, with very, very precise estimates of how much it's going to cost. They're all complete nonsense, right? They're all trying to be precisely wrong rather than roughly right, which is the important thing. We don't know how much it's going to cost because we don't know where wholesale energy prices are going to go, not least because we don't know what's going to happen between the war in Ukraine and the extent to which Russia is indeed going to cut off gas to Western Europe, how the rest of the world's energy complex responds. Can we get that liquefied natural gas from America, from Qatar? We just don't know. It's clear, though, it's going to cost probably as much as furlough, if not more. That's 70 to 100 for billion pounds. Put that in context. We spend about 150 billion a year on the NHS. We were about to borrow this year 100 billion anyway, so we're doubling government borrowing, Mark, at a stroke. And yet, despite that, because they're talking about helping businesses, share prices have gone up on this news, despite that massive borrowing, because the market could see otherwise there would have been
carnage,
so many bankruptcies. I think businesses and the media class has been very slow to cotton on to the impact on business, but now finally we have.
But this massive borrowing, how politically difficult is that? It's not really in the Thatcherite tradition which she styles herself in, is it?
It's interesting, isn't it? She's come into office as a low tax Thatcherite, complete with the pussy bow and the blue dress and so on. And yet her first, as I was discussing with Darren McCaffrey outside Downing Street yesterday, her first act is a massive, you know, hundreds of billions of pounds intervention. I don't really think she's got a choice. If we had done nothing, you know, I don't want to sound irresponsible or alarmist, I think there would have been genuine sort of civic concern protests, mass non-payment of bills, and indeed thousands of bankruptcies.
What about the political fallout when we had Sir Keir Starmer looking at this Treasury estimate of 170 billion over 2 years in what he certainly said were excess profits? That's going to be very difficult for her if, obviously, the bill for the taxpayer is going to be, substantial over the next 2 years. How does she argue away those profits of the energy companies?
Two main ways. The first way is that she'll argue about the specifics. She'll say, as I just said, and it's undeniably true, it depends on where the wholesale energy price goes. The second, Mark, I think we're going to see a more cultural argument as Liz Truss, a former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, a pretty able mathematician, will push back.
An accountant as well at one time,
back, and she will say, this is Project Fear Mark II. In an interview I just did with an economist who she cites as one of her main sort of intellectual influences, Patrick Minford. He literally
was a Thatcherite.
He literally used that phrase with me. This is Project Fear Mark II from the Treasury, harking back to the time, in his view, when the Treasury said if we leave the European Union, there would be an immediate and profound economic shock, which didn't happen. There is not going to be just, arguments about the precise numbers. There is going to be kind of institutional pushback from Number 10 against the Treasury, against what Truss's supporters would call the blob.
And the orthodoxy, that was the other word, wasn't it? Yeah. Liam, as ever, thank you. More details to come, as we say, tomorrow. Yeah.
Coming up, Liz Truss has held her first cabinet meeting and her first Prime Minister's questions. How did she do? We'll be speaking to body language expert Judy James. First, it's your news update with Rosie.
A very good afternoon. 1:30.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching GB Newsday, and to remind you, we're online, on TV, on DAB radio with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria De Piero. It was Liz Truss's first Prime Minister's questions today. We've been speaking about the content of what she said. But what about how she came across in terms of her performance and body language? Have a look at a clip from earlier on of Liz Truss explaining her economic vision.
I'm on the side of people who work hard and do the right thing. That is why we will reverse the national insurance increase, and that is why we will keep corporation tax low. Because ultimately, we want investment right across our country. We want new jobs and new opportunities, and that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister.
Did she deliver? Well, joining us now, body language expert Judy James. Judy, you've been watching how she delivered things at Dispatch Box. I mean, interesting that she had that eye line straight to Sir Keir Starmer. She wasn't looking at the Speaker or the rest of the Commons as Boris Johnson used to do and turn around. It was tunnel vision.
Yeah, she wasn't playing to the crowd. Truss's body language is fascinating because it's a hybrid between either Margaret Thatcher or Mavis Riley from Coronation Street.
What a mix.
She can go from extremes, and what we got there was very much Thatcher. It's so much so that it was almost déjà vu. The gloves were never on between her and Starmer. They went straight for the jugular, and they both started patronising one another with their body language. But if you look at her body language there, she was doing the Thatcher lean across the Dispatch Box. She was doing the high eyebrows. She was doing the staccato blink. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that, it's very sort of, you're a naughty schoolboy, you know, it's very diminishing body language. And her gesticulation, I was very surprised. I thought this was going to be a snooze fest, to be honest. But her gesticulation, we had the one hand explaining, but then the weaponry came out very quickly. The dueling finger came out, and she did start punching it down on the Dispatch Box. So he triggered the Thatcher side of her. He probably would prefer to trigger the Mavis Riley if he wants to win the day.
Do you think it was natural, or do you think she's actually had training in how to actually, you know, deliver for the speeches, as so much media training for politicians nowadays?
I saw a change over the hustings and everything. There were certain traits that, I mean, I was completely delighted. I don't know if she heard me muttering at her, but I got very annoyed when they were doing their original debates, when they were doing what's called the invisible brick, which is, I have a problem, I know the problem, and when you come to, I know the solution, you should do a precision gesture. And she did today, the first time that I've seen a precision gesture that implies that they do know almost forensically how they're going to solve the problem. Now, whether that was because she heard my thoughts coming down the line, that would probably be a bit of training, I would imagine.
OK, we have got another clip. This is when former Prime Minister Theresa May asked why all past female Prime Ministers had been Conservatives.
Can I ask my right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all three female Prime Ministers have been Conservative?
My right honourable friend for her fantastic question. I look forward to calling on her advice from her time in office as I start my work.
What about that?
That's one of my favourite moments ever in PMQs.
Why?
She rose like Banquo's ghost, and I mean, she's been sitting there with Boris now for ages, throwing poison darts of eye contact at the back of his head. Suddenly, she was on team. She rose up, but she also used a precision gesture. She used a steepling precision gesture, and that's a gesture of power. It was almost like, I am the old Prime Minister, but I've still got the power there. And I loved the way that she actually unleashed a little bit of showboating.
Yeah, but just seeing the Liz Truss sort of hand going back, was that sort of inviting, or...?
It was an acknowledgement, and I loved that nod that they did between the two. That was a wonderful sign of teamwork. You don't see that a lot, looking that congruent and that genuine. That was my wing woman is now standing up, and she's going to be there behind me rather than fighting me.
OK, let's move on to another moment. This was when Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer first spoke from across the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on her appointment? When she said in her leadership campaign that she was against windfall taxes, did she mean it?
He's changed slightly. We didn't get when he was waiting to speak to Boris. We used to get a foot tap going on. If he was impatient, he couldn't wait to get in there. And he used to go very much into alpha mode. You'd get a very puffed chest. It was almost like physical fighting. He made a concession, which is that he didn't do that today. But you notice he went straight in there. There were very little in the way of niceties.
I noticed, actually, that he was different, Sir Keir Starmer, against Liz Truss than he was against Boris Johnson. His questions were shorter as well.
Yes.
But is that elongated question? Because I used to think he was too verbose. So I think he's got a problem with being too verbose in his questions. Is that a sign of being alpha or attempting to be alpha?
In a way, I think it got into alpha legal mode. You know, it was almost courtroom time.
Yeah.
And you could see the way that it was almost like, I'm going to ask you the question in a slightly patronising way. And you could hear from the way that he asked the question that the answer was going to lead her into trouble. You know, I'm going to follow up on this one. So he was back to his forensic self, and he'd lost, as you say, that physical alpha presence, but he'd gone into intellectual. And I think he may be hoping to get some more direct answers from her. I think he knew that anything he flung at Boris...
OK,
Boris
so what was the better watch? Was it Boris Johnson versus Sir Keir Starmer, or was it Liz Truss versus Sir Keir Starmer?
I hate you for asking that, because you know what I'm going to say, don't you? It has to be Boris.
Really? The theatrics are still there.
The flamboyance, the performance.
Yeah.
And why is it that... Because only politicians use those sort of... You know, when we're chatting, I don't say, I want to say to you... Oh, sorry,
I don't reply either. No, that's right, yeah.
And the worst one is the thumb of power, the Tony Blair...
Oh, I've got the thumb of power. It's called the autocue operator, so, yeah, there we are.
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah.
I'm making my point like this, which nobody normal... And when I was a politician, I didn't do it either, by the way, just to reassure you.
No.
Where does it come from?
Again, that's because Tony Blair used to point in the days it was banned, so they used to say, no, you can't point. Put the thumb on top of it and make you look tough. It doesn't. It's ridiculous. Don't try it down the pub. It doesn't work.
Gonna have a pint of lager and 4 packs of
Don't try it down pub. Wise
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Judy.
Let's move on now to other news, with 4 men being arrested in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell now being released on bail.
The 9-year-old was shot in her home last month. In an emotional video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside police, Cheryl Corbell paid tribute to her daughter and told those responsible that they need to own up.
Well, let's go to our GB News North West reporter, Sophie Reaper. Sophie, you've been following this, of course, very difficult for the family. What's been the reaction up there?
Well, the reaction has been that people, I think, are still just in shock. A total of 4 men were arrested on Sunday in relation to Olivia's death. We've heard from Merseyside police today that those 4 men have now been released. One man, a 34-year-old from Liverpool, was arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder, whereas the other 3 men, a 29-year-old, a 34-year-old and a 41-year-old, were arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender. Now, when I've spoken to people, there seems to be a sense of shock that they seem to be arresting people and yet they've still not found the person behind it, and people keep being released on bail and still no luck. We heard from Olivia's mum, Cheryl, for the first time yesterday since her daughter was killed, and she has urged the person behind Olivia's death to come forward.
Everyone that she met, they all fell in love with her. She left a mark on everyone that she met. And she may well have only been 9, but she packed a lot in them 9 years. I'm hoping that they come forward so this doesn't happen to anybody else. you know you've done wrong. So you need to own up.
Now, of course, the entire family of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have been devastated by the death of the little girl. We also heard from Olivia's father yesterday, who said the death of his daughter cannot be in vain. This is a sentiment shared by Merseyside police, who continue to say they will work until they find the person behind Olivia's death, and their sentiment continues as a strong message that silence is not an option.
Sophie Reaper, thanks as ever for that update. Really tough watching Olivia's mum, Cheryl.
Yeah, and of course we'll update you on any developments on that story as they come in. Now let's turn to sport, because Chelsea have sacked manager Thomas Tuchel following their third defeat of the new season. The club saying in their statement the owners believed now was the right time to bring in a new head coach. Well, the 49-year-old German had previously had stints at Borussia Dortmund and Paris Saint-Germain, but leaves Chelsea sitting in 6th place in the Premier League. Well, joining us now is sports broadcaster and journalist Ben Jacobs. Ben, thanks for joining us. Was it this latest loss to Dinamo Zagreb that really sealed his fate?
I don't think results actually had a great deal to do with it. You can look at the 3 losses that you mentioned, particularly in that Champions League opener in Croatia. But Thomas Tuchel had a friction with the new ownership group, who are looking to implement a new era and strategy, and they want their head coach or manager to be part of the business as well as the football side. And Tuchel is ultimately a world-class coach. He won the Champions League with Chelsea, but he's had to take on added responsibility. And on the one hand, as head coach, he wants that because he can pick the players that the club signs, but it involves being part of the transfer window and of the pitch as well around players. And I think that added responsibility, and in a new era as well, made it very difficult for Thomas Tuchel, who didn't over-communicate with the American-led consortium. So there was always that bubbling in the background. And then when you get 3 losses on top of that, I think that is why the new ownership group, and Todd Boehly in particular, who's the chairman, decided to make a change so early in the season.
Yeah, especially, I guess, when they've spent, was it 255 million, I think was the estimate, a new UK record?
Yeah, that is a record for Chelsea. It's close to the world record as well, which Real Madrid spent in 2019. And that, I suppose, is the irony with all of this, that if you give the manager control, you let him pick his players. Somebody like Raheem Sterling, who you can see there, or Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who's a Thomas Tuchel favourite, arrives. Then to have Tuchel depart so soon after is reasonably strange, because then Chelsea don't have the manager that picked the players, and they still don't have a permanent sporting director as well. So this is actually quite cutthroat. It's very similar to how Roman Abramovich acted, and Chelsea obviously will have some replacements in mind as a result, because they cannot leave too much time now without a manager and without a sporting director as well. And that is why the club have already made contact with Brighton's Graham Potter, and the former Tottenham and PSG boss Mauricio Pochettino is also under consideration as well.
Yeah, the Seagulls down at the Amex Stadium won't be happy with that, of course. I think they got up to 4th place, and he's done a fantastic job. But clearly there's going to have to be a decision whether it's a domestic manager or some other international name, as you say.
Yeah, I think there's a short list of 4 at the moment, as I understand it, but 2 clear front runners in Pochettino and Potter. Potter is the priority, and Brighton have already given Chelsea permission to speak to Potter, who deserves this kind of opportunity. He's done a wonderful job at Brighton. There will be a fee of around 10 million to get him out of his contract, whereas Pochettino has departed PSG and is a free signing as a result. So the cheaper option, and there is some respect for Pochettino amongst the Chelsea board. Let's not forget that Jonathan Goldstein and Todd Boehly both made a ploy to try and buy Tottenham Hotspur a few years back. So they know Pochettino very well, but Potter is the favourite at the moment. And then the other 2 on the short list, loosely speaking anyway, Zinedine Zidane and the Leicester manager Brendan Rodgers, who are bottom of the Premier League table, but those 2 haven't yet been approached. So it looks like there's 4 on the short list, but actually only 2 active candidates, at least for now.
Ben, thanks very much indeed for updating us with that. Who's your money on then, Pochettino or Potter?
Oh, stop it. Stop it. I'm all over this one,
We shall see, indeed. Yeah, that's what 255 million gets you, I don't know.
Moving on. Back to our top story this hour. Liz Truss chaired her first cabinet meeting this morning. Then she held her first Prime Minister's questions. Alongside her on the front bench in the Commons was Kwasi Kwarteng, who's been put in charge of public finances as our Chancellor, tasked with tackling soaring inflation.
Yeah, well, that cost of living crisis, the energy bills high on the list of priorities for the new government, and indeed the small boats crisis in the Channel, let's not forget, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and staying on top of a threat posed by China, all key concerns.
James Cleverly will be responsible for representing the UK on the world stage as Foreign Secretary, while Suella Braverman will deal with immigration at the Home Office, and Ben Wallace will stay at Defence.
Well, let's speak now to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who can talk us through all those new appointments. And, Mark, we got an indication, of course, that in terms of defence, certainly, they want this continuity to carry on.
Well, there's no doubt that Ben Wallace has done a very good job in his defence role at a time of heightened crisis with what is happening in Ukraine. He's been, I think, roundly praised, really by both sides of the political debate, by the way in which he has handled what is a very difficult situation across in Ukraine. So clearly Liz Truss has decided that Ben Wallace should remain in that place. Another interesting appointment, of course, Tom Tugendhat to the role of Security Minister, which normally didn't have a seat in Cabinet, but he now gets to attend Cabinet, an indication of the multiple challenges around security. And Suella Braverman, of course, I should say, the new Home Secretary in post. She went to meet the Permanent Secretary and some staff at the Home Office last night. It's her first full day today. And of course, top of the list, really, the to-do list, the urgent to-do list, is the small boats crisis. We have heard today, again from our sources on the other side of the Channel, that some 5,000 Albanians are waiting along the northwest coast of France, brought there by the people smuggling gangs, the Albanian criminal gangs who've taken over a lot of the people smuggling trade, and they're waiting for better weather conditions before pushing many of these people out en masse across the Channel. But even in poor conditions, Mark, they're still heading out there. So Suella Braverman knows that she has a very difficult task ahead trying to get to grips with this crisis.
Why would Suella Braverman succeed where Priti Patel was unable to succeed?
Well, I mean, only time will tell whether she will actually succeed. She is wedded, along with Liz Truss, because it was said so in the leadership campaign, to the Rwanda policy, this policy of pushing people out towards Rwanda that come into the country by irregular routes, so across the Channel in small boats or in the backs of lorries. But that, of course, is currently bogged down in legal challenges in the courts. But if they can't get that through, if it's at the end of the day deemed to be unlawful, then it's back to the drawing board really for Suella Braverman and her team at the Home Office. We have got some breaking news, actually, that I want to bring to you, which is a video that we've just obtained, which has just been posted on social media, and it really highlights what we're seeing in the Channel in terms of a warning that we got yesterday from the authorities, sources telling us that the Albanian gangs in particular are risking people's lives by putting these boats into the water in poor weather conditions. Well, this TikTok video shows a group, we believe mostly Albanians, on an inflatable boat coming across the English Channel. The boat and the video has accompanying words in Albanian on the screen, which read, "The young people stingy breaks while crossing the Channel. God save the youth," it also says. And on the video you can actually see groups of young men on either side of this inflatable, sitting on the sides of the inflatable, their legs submerged in the water. The inflatable itself is waterlogged, and if this was actually taken yesterday or even this morning, certainly the weather conditions out in the channel are appalling. We don't know at this stage whether this inflatable made it to UK waters or not.
And Mark, just give us an indication as to what the options could be for sort of Braverman in terms of coping with these sorts of events. I mean, they've tried the Border Force, they've tried the Royal Navy without success. I mean, what other things could they put in place?
Well, certainly they will have to, there is no doubt, put more resources into the channel. There's a lot of criticism, of course, because many people say, well, those resources are acting effectively as a taxi service, going to pick up these people and bring them to the UK. However, the authorities say that actually they are bound by international law to save lives at sea. If these boats are coming across into UK waters, clearly they're unseaworthy vessels. They're coming across a very busy shipping lane. They say they have to respond and rescue these people. But interesting, you mentioned there, Mark, about the Royal Navy. Well, of course, the Ministry of Defence, the Royal Navy, is pulling out of that task that they took on in April of this year, the command and control of the operations. Since they took over the command and control of those operations, one boat, we think, has made it to shore. That was a couple of days ago, a boat that made it to the Pebble Beach near Folkestone there, and a group were seen coming from the dinghy, and some of them running away towards the town itself, and unknown if all of those people were then eventually picked up. But yeah, they will give up command and control. That responsibility will revert back to Border Force. So Suella Braverman will have to put more resources back into Border Force to help ensure that they can deal with what is, as we see, week in, week out, month after month, a growing crisis.
Mark, as ever, thank you for updating us with the very latest on that situation across the channel there. Thank you.
Lots more coming up for you in the next hour, but first, let's get a check on the weather.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. We're looking at another day of sunshine and showers. Some of these will be heavy at times, and this continues over the next few days. And the reason for this is low pressure continues to be in charge of our weather. This system hasn't gone anywhere very quickly, bringing showers spiralling around the system, and this continues to be the case over the next couple of days too. Through the rest of Wednesday, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers to end the day. Some of these will be heavy, thundery at times, perhaps during the early hours merging to give some longer spells of rain across southeast England. Showers frequent across Wales and southwestern parts too. Elsewhere, some clear spells developing, but a mild night. 13 to 15 Celsius for many of us. So that takes us into Thursday morning. Sunny spells across parts of the Midlands, northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, but showers soon get going here as we move through the day. Elsewhere, sunny spells and showers, perhaps some longer spells of heavy rain across Scotland. Showers will be heavy, thundery, some hail in there too, some difficult travelling conditions, but quite a warm and humid day again. Temperatures getting into the low 20s, 22 to 24 Celsius in the southeast, the low 20s elsewhere. Through into Thursday evening, showers continue for many, perhaps some longer spells of rain pushing into northern England, southern Scotland, this turning heavy at times. Later on, perhaps a drier interlude for some areas, but this area of rain pushing its way slowly westwards. In between, an overnight, some clear skies, but temperatures again 13 to 15 Celsius, so staying on the warm side for early September. Friday morning, we've got outbreaks of rain pushing its way southwards across the northwest of the UK. Some of this heavy at times. A bit of uncertainty of how far south this pushes during Friday. In between, some clear spells, quite a bit of cloud around, some heavy showers. Perhaps coming drier as we move into the weekend for a time, ahead of more rain and temperatures in the low 20s for many of us.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 4 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. The former Prime Minister Theresa May took the opportunity to throw in a light-hearted question today at Prime Minister's Questions. I will play that to you when we can. What a shame. In the meantime, Liz Truss, though, has confirmed a package of support will be announced tomorrow to help people deal with rising energy prices. It was her first Prime Minister's Questions, and she reiterated her position on the windfall tax, saying it's the wrong time to discourage companies from investing in the UK. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused her of protecting the profits of Shell and giving Amazon a tax break rather than helping families and public services.
The Prime Minister knows she's no choice but to back an energy price freeze. But it won't be cheap, and the real choice, the political choice, is who is going to pay. Is she really telling us that she's going to leave these vast excess profits on the table and make working people foot the bill for decades to come?
Well, I understand that people across our country are struggling with the cost of living and they're struggling with their energy bills. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, will take immediate action to help people with the cost of their energy bills. And I will be making an announcement to this House on that tomorrow and giving people certainty to make sure that they are able to get through this winter and be able to have the energy supplies and be able to afford it.
That's a glimpse of the new Prime Minister's first PMQs. I can now bring you what former Prime Minister Theresa May had to say.
Can I ask my right honourable friend, why does she think it is that all three female Prime Ministers have been Conservative?
My right honourable friend for her fantastic question. I look forward to calling on her advice from her time in office as I start my work as Prime Minister. It is quite extraordinary, isn't it, that there doesn't seem to be the ability in the Labour Party to find a female leader, or indeed a leader who doesn't come from North London. Yeah.
Other news now. 10 animal rights protesters have been arrested after vandalising Parliament with white paint. Animal Rebellion wants Liz Truss to take action on dairy farming. The group says it's getting worse because of climate change. Some of the activists also glued themselves to the pavement outside the Palace of Westminster shortly before Prime Minister's questions. The former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's obviously disappointed that he has to face a retrial. The judge's decision comes after a jury failed to reach a verdict in his domestic violence case last week. The 48-year-old denies controlling and coercive behaviour against his former girlfriend, Kate Greville. The new trial date has been set for July next year. 4 men arrested in connection with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell have been released on bail. The 9-year-old was shot in her home last month. Her mother, who was also injured by the gunman, has told those responsible they need to own up. In a video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside Police, Cheryl Corbell paid tribute to her daughter.
You know you've done wrong, so you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
GBNews sources say more than 5,000 Albanians are gathering in northwestern France, preparing to cross the Channel. They're expected to attempt the journey in the coming days and are waiting for the weather to improve. Authorities are warning that crime gangs seem increasingly prepared to risk people's lives by pushing unseaworthy boats into the water in rough conditions. Almost 28,000 people have been intercepted crossing the Channel so far this year. Prince Charles will meet the parents of a teenager who died from an allergic reaction as he hosts a global conference on allergies. The event was organised by the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, set up by the parents of 15-year-old Natasha. She died following a severe allergic reaction to sesame in a Pret sandwich during a flight to France in 2016. Australian tennis player Nick Kyrgios's quest for his first Grand Slam title has ended after he failed to reach the semi-finals of the US Open. Kyrgios let his temper get the better of him, taking his frustration out on not one, but 2 of his rackets after he lost to Russia's Karen Khachanov in 5 sets before leaving the court. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Newsday.
Welcome back. So Liz Truss faced her first Prime Minister's questions today, facing Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer. They clashed over the cost of living, energy plans and taxation. Let's take a look at the key exchanges.
When she said in her leadership campaign that she was against windfall taxes, did she mean it?
I am against a windfall tax. I believe it is the wrong thing to be putting companies off investing in the United Kingdom just when we need to be growing the economy.
Is she really telling us that she's going to leave these vast excess profits on the table and make working people foot the bill for decades to come?
Well, I understand that people across our country are struggling with the cost of living and they're struggling with their energy bills. And that is why I, as Prime Minister, will take immediate action to help people with the cost of their energy bills. And I will be making an announcement to this House on that tomorrow.
So, Mr. Speaker, her first act as Prime Minister is to borrow more than is needed because she won't touch excess oil and gas profits. On that topic, how much would her planned corporation tax cut hand out to companies?
The right honourable gentleman is looking at this in the wrong way. The last time we cut corporation tax, we attracted more revenue into the exchequer because more companies wanted to base themselves in Britain, more companies wanted to invest in our country. And if taxes are put up and raised to the same level as France, which is what the current proposal is, and which I will change as Prime Minister, that will put off investors, it will put off those companies investing in our economy, and ultimately that will mean fewer jobs, less growth and less opportunities across our country.
Families and public services need every penny they can get. How on earth does she think that now is the right time to protect Shell's profits and give Amazon a tax break?
I'm on the side of people who work hard and do the right thing. That is why we will reverse the national insurance increase, and that is why we will keep corporation tax low.
And can't she see there's nothing new about a Tory Prime Minister who, when asked who pays, says it's you, the working people of Britain?
Well, there's nothing new about a Labour leader who is calling for more tax rises. The right honourable gentleman doesn't understand aspiration. He doesn't understand opportunity. He doesn't understand that people want to keep more of their own money. And that is what I will deliver as Prime Minister. I will take immediate action to help people with their energy bills, but also secure our long-term energy supply. I will take immediate action to make sure we have lower taxes and we grow the economy. And that way, I will ensure we have a positive future for our country and we get Britain moving.
So, PMQs, feisty stuff. Let's get the views of our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's in Downing Street and has been following the latest Punch and Judy politics, as it used to be called. But it was a pretty good show. Feisty stuff and on matters of real substance too.
Yeah, indeed. Really interesting, that, isn't it? That it wasn't the usual bluster that we have tended to see in the months and years gone by, particularly with Boris Johnson, it must be said, at the dispatch box. It means it was a rather more dull affair, I might well suggest, but maybe people actually want slightly more dull, policy-focused politics at the moment, given the situation the country finds itself in. I must say Liz Truss is back inside at number 10 now after PMQ. She had a rather, I think, warm couple of words with Keir Starmer at the Speaker's chair in the Commons. And then she went around the tea rooms, meeting lots of the MPs, lots of her own MPs, lots of selfies were taken with her. But in the end, I thought it was pretty assured Prime Minister's question time from Liz Truss. I thought she was pretty confident, pretty pithy in her answers. Actually, on the whole, answer the question she was asked, which is pretty novel in politics these days. But you're right in saying that there is this kind of big policy divide now for voters, particularly when it comes to this idea of how things are going to pan out with the economy in the future. Liz Truss pretty ideological in saying that she wants to be a Conservative Prime Minister that wants to impose or have tax cuts for us all. But Keir Starmer making the point that fundamentally, when you look at this energy price freeze on the cap that's likely to be announced tomorrow, the big question, who's going to pay for that? And we saw a big debate about that windfall tax and whether it should be those energy companies that are making billions and billions and billions of pounds in excess profits, or whether it should come either through borrowing or higher bills for all of us for decades to come. We're going to get the detail tomorrow, but Liz Truss was pretty clear today that she does not want to see another windfall tax. There is one, of course, in place. She's not going to scrap that one, but she doesn't want to see any more. In saying that, this ideological battle that we're talking about, in some ways, again, is a debating point. It's a moot point. And I say that because even though Liz Truss has repeatedly said that she wants to be a Conservative Prime Minister, she is about to launch the greatest state intervention in the energy sector that we've not seen since the 1970s. Now, the Conservative Party, the government will argue these are extraordinary times, but it is a sign that while she may well be ideological and wants to present herself as an ideologically driven Conservative Prime Minister, she can be pretty pragmatic at the same time too.
Darren in Downing Street, thanks for your assessment on that.
Let's get more reaction to Prime Minister Liz Truss's debut at Prime Minister's Question Time. Let's speak to Toby Perkins, Shadow Education Minister. Hi there, Toby. She was sure-footed, she was confident. Do you think Labour might have underestimated Liz Truss?
No, I don't. I think that my personal view was she looks like nervy early on, that she's pretty wooden, but I've seen her in Parliament over 12 years, and you know, I don't think we underestimate her at all. But I think the important thing that came out of today wasn't about how assured she was or whether she had any decent gags. It was that we now have a very clear political divide between two parties. We have the big question facing us, which everyone knew was going to be the cost of living. You've got the Labour Party who are saying that in terms of the inevitable action that has to be taken to reduce people's bills, it should be the energy generators who are making these monstrous unexpected profits that pay for it. Liz Truss said, no, we don't think they should. We'll find out tomorrow who she thinks will pay for it, but I imagine it's going to end up being further debt that the rest of us will end up paying in years to come. So the key question about today was that big first choice that she had. Was she going to go for this windfall tax, or was she going to pursue further tax cuts for big business, corporation tax cut that she's already committed to, and the refusal for the windfall tax? And so you've got a clear divide. And when I knock on doors this weekend, I don't expect anyone to say to me that you're all the same, because there is a big political choice for people now.
And do you think this will be returned to tomorrow, Toby, when we get the details, or we're expected to get the details on the energy bailout itself, in terms of, you know, how we pay for it and who pays for it?
Well, exactly. I mean, we will find out tomorrow if she's ruled out a windfall tax. It limits her options considerably. What she was sort of indicating today suggested that it would be some kind of borrowing, and we'll have to see how she expects to pay that back in the future. I think that a moment like now, where alongside the energy prices, which are particularly a fear for people, but also the big increases in fuel prices, in food prices, people will look askance at a government who are willing to give huge amounts of money away to big business in a further corporation tax cut. You know, that is a very different priority to the one that Labour would have. But we will see the details tomorrow. But the big thing from today is people have got a big political choice now. There's two parties offering very, very different alternatives to the country's issues, and I'm very pleased that I think Labour are on the right side of that.
Are you in danger of being complacent? Because the facts are that tomorrow and within weeks, people's energy bills will be frozen, and she's going to reduce people's taxes. I suspect most people in Britain will quite like those two things.
Well, let's see if she does reduce people's taxes. I mean, if she cuts corporation tax, it doesn't make me better off, doesn't make the majority of my constituents better off. I think that if what she says to us tomorrow is, I'm going to freeze your bills, but I'm going to expect you to pay them back in the future, and I'm going to choose not to ask the energy companies who are experiencing these monstrous unexpected profits, I'm not going to expect them to pay it, then I think that's a battle I'll be very happy to have, actually.
What about the rather sort of stinging accusation she made against Keir Starmer? You don't understand aspiration. I mean, do you think that might strike a chord with quite a few voters?
Not at all. I think Keir Starmer's the very embodiment of aspiration. He's the son of a toolmaker and a nurse who made it in his profession to the very highest post in the land, and then changed career and became the leader of the Labour Party. I don't see what more aspiration than that she could have expected. Keir Starmer's not someone born with a silver spoon in his mouth who just walked into power as some of these Tories are. I think she was absolutely on the wrong lines there.
OK, Toby Perkins, Shadow Education Minister, thank you very much for your time down at Westminster. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
So what might the election of Liz Truss mean for Scotland?
Well, earlier on in the leadership campaign, she said, of course, the best thing to do with Nicola Sturgeon is to ignore her. She's an attention seeker. That is what she is.
We can get some reaction from Scotland now and speak to Scottish Conservative, member of the Scottish Parliament, Sir Edward Mountain. Thank you for your time today. Is Liz Truss good for your party's fortunes in Scotland? And if you're going to say yes, please tell me why.
Sorry, I didn't fully hear the question, sorry.
Oh, forgive me. How is Liz Truss, your new Prime Minister, your new party leader, how is she going to improve the fortunes of the Scottish Conservative Party? What would you like her to do?
Well, first of all, I want to offer my congratulations to her. It's clear that she won a majority and will be bringing the party back together. And I think the first thing that she's going to be looking at doing is working with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, to find ways where we can work together on this cost of living crisis, which is a huge problem.
And in terms of how you tackle the Scottish nationalists and Liz Truss, I mean, do you carry on ignoring her, as Liz Truss indicated?
Liz Truss is perfectly aware what it's like to be a statesman or stateswoman, and she will understand the need to engage with Nicola Sturgeon, and I have every confidence that she'll do that. She clearly has been able to do it in the previous portfolios that she's held with other leaders of other nations, and I'm clear that she'll do it with Nicola Sturgeon. And I hope that Nicola Sturgeon has the good grace to reach out to Liz Truss and try and work with her, rather than trying to find ways of dividing the nation, which frankly is not in anyone's benefit.
Why on earth would she do that when she's been told she's going to be ignored by the new leader of the Conservative Party and now the Prime Minister?
I don't think Liz Truss will ever ignore Nicola Sturgeon. You saw that they had a perfectly honest conversation when they met, and I think that will continue. And I look forward to welcoming Liz Truss up to Scotland to meet with Nicola Sturgeon and to meet with her MSPs, who will be working hard for the Conservative cause north of the border, and the Union, of course.
You can't deny that there's going to be a touch of frost in the air, though, can you? When someone has called somebody an attention seeker, you're appealing for them to work together. I mean, would you be that nice to somebody who had insulted you so publicly?
Well, I never think calling people names is useful, and therefore I'm not going to do that. And I'm absolutely convinced that I know Liz well enough to know that she'll hold out her hand to Nicola to meet and to discuss things. And, you know, we've got to be honest that Nicola hasn't always been friendly and cooperative with previous prime ministers of the United Kingdom. And I hope that she takes this opportunity to reset the clock and talk to Liz in the way that I know Liz will want to talk to her.
And on that aspect, what is your assessment now of the state of the Union and where we are with these calls for a second referendum vote and debate?
Well, I think it's really interesting is that, you know, less than 2 years ago, we had the Scottish Government saying that they weren't wanting a referendum while we were dealing with COVID because it was a huge crisis. We had Nicola Sturgeon yesterday in the programme for government saying that it was a humanitarian emergency that we're dealing with the cost of living crisis. We need to deal with that. Let's not deal with dividing the United Kingdom at this stage. It's not something we should be dealing with. It should be working together. I've always found that being part of a team is much better than working individually. And that's what we need to do, and both governments need to do that together.
So Edward Mountain in Holyrood, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in GB News. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Now, we are going to take a short break, but coming up, will the Prime Minister's plans to help struggling families and businesses add up? We'll have analysis from GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan. Now it's time for your weather.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales,
And Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
So, as we've seen already, Prime Minister Liz Truss with a pretty full in-tray, to say the least, also overseeing an economy characterised at the moment by spiralling prices, a growth slowdown and, in her view at least, high taxation too.
And on top of that, government will soon, probably tomorrow, be unveiling an energy support package as households struggle to cope with spiralling energy bills. So let's hear now from GB News economics and business editor Liam Halligan for his take on what that energy package may look like, with his regular GB News feature On the Money.
Well, Prime Minister Liz Truss knows that she needs to tackle the UK's energy crisis as her very first priority. Household fuel bills are soaring, given that rising Ofgem energy price cap. And UK businesses benefit from no price cap protection whatsoever. So they're facing even sharper price spikes, which could spark multiple bankruptcies. Energy campaigners, they're angry that this 7-week Tory leadership contest has been so prolonged, delaying the formation of a new government and a new energy support package.
The dereliction of duty, to have sat on your hands and to watch this come kind of crashing towards us. I think, look, the urgent issue is to provide immediate support to people on the lowest income. That could be doubling the package that we had in May from then Chancellor Sunak to match the new reality. It could be even more than that. I think that's a no-brainer. They have to do it. Whether they go for price freezes and intervene directly between the costs in the system of the energy market and the retail, well, maybe they'll have no choice about that.
Last autumn, the Ofgem energy regulator capped the energy bills for a typical family at £1,277. That cap rose sharply to almost £2,000 in April this year as wholesale gas prices soared, with gas used to generate electricity, of course. And we've recently learned that from October, household bills are set to rise above £3,500 a year. That's eye-watering, almost a threefold rise in less than 12 months. As well as households, the new government needs to consider the impact of this energy price crisis on firms. Across Britain, all kinds of companies, from pubs, shops and restaurants to steel makers and manufacturers, they're seeing their energy bills spiral, even more than households. That's because that Ofgem energy price cap doesn't apply to firms, tens of thousands of which across the country are now at risk of bankruptcy. On the Money spoke to the boss of one Sheffield-based manufacturer.
I would like something like an energy price cap, to be honest with you, Liam, because obviously that would be the benefit, the best thing for us right now, because you may or may not be aware that our gas and utility price is roughly about £500,000 per annum right now. But the latest contract I'm trying to negotiate for the next 2 years is £2 million per annum. So you can imagine that £1.5 million extra cost is rather a large burden to bear.
So what is this new government energy support package to be unveiled tomorrow going to look like? Now, Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, he announced a £400 grant to help all households. On top of that, more vulnerable families, those on certain benefits, they're due to receive an additional £650 a year. But these policies were set when wholesale prices were much lower. So it now looks like we need even bolder measures. Truss and her team are now expected to freeze energy prices for 2 years at April 2022 levels. That's just under £2,000 a year for the typical household, scrapping that recently announced October Ofgem price cap altogether in a bid to ease the burden on households. And that's likely to cost the government around £100 billion. That's more than furlough. At a stroke, it doubles government borrowing this year. The reality is that this huge bill could soar even more. As the war in Ukraine drags on, those wholesale energy prices, they remain high and extremely volatile, not least with Russia restricting supplies of gas to Western Europe. One reason this energy support package is so expensive is that ministers have now indicated there will be assistance announced tomorrow for businesses as well as households. To me, that makes total sense, because if countless businesses fold, we could have a jobs crisis too. But the cost that Liz Truss is going to announce tomorrow is going to be sky high, and there's concern financial markets could rebel as the government tries to borrow much more. So this energy package is risky. Can the UK afford to do it? Or can we afford not to?
Thank you so much to Liam Halligan. We'll have those firm details, but if anybody has an inside track, it's our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan.
Coming up, more reaction to PMQs and Liz Truss's debut today with the Shadow Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth. And we're joined by, in the studio, Matt Hutchinson from Spare Room, after Nicola Sturgeon announced that rent freeze in Scotland. First, though, let's get an update on the news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Liz Truss has confirmed a package of support will be announced tomorrow to help people deal with rising energy prices. During her first Prime Minister's questions, she reiterated her position on a windfall tax, saying it's the wrong time to discourage companies from investing in the UK. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused her of protecting the profits of Shell and giving Amazon a tax break rather than helping families and public services. 10 activists have been arrested after vandalising Parliament with white paint. It's animal rebellion. They want Liz Truss to take action on dairy farming, which the group says is worsening climate change. Some of the protesters also glued themselves to the pavement outside of the Palace of Westminster, shortly before Prime Minister's questions. Former Manchester United footballer Ryan Giggs says he's obviously disappointed that he has to face a retrial. The judge's decision comes after a jury failed to reach a verdict in his domestic violence case last week. The 48-year-old denies controlling and coercive behaviour against his former girlfriend, Kate Greville. The new trial date has been set for July next year. GB News sources say more than 5,000 Albanians are gathering in northwestern France, ready to cross the Channel. They're expected to attempt the journey in the coming days and are waiting for the weather to improve. Almost 28,000 people have been intercepted crossing the Channel so far this year. We're on your TV, we're online and on your radio. It's GB News. Don't go anywhere. Newsday, Mark and Gloria will be back in a moment.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
on TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to the programme. More reaction to Liz Truss's debut at Prime Minister's Questions now. Let's speak to Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Jonathan Ashworth. Jonathan Ashworth, good to see you. This expected offer from the government is going to last longer and go further than Labour's proposals, and it will help businesses too. You've been outflanked.
Well, let's see what she actually says. If she is going to impose some form of freeze on energy bills, then it's pretty clear to me that Keir Starmer has been leading the public debate, because it's not so long ago that Liz Truss was saying she was vehemently opposed to any handouts. But we'll study the detail. What I think is extraordinary is that Liz Truss today ruled out an extension of the windfall tax on gas and oil producers to pay for any proposal, and they're set to make £170 billion worth of excess profits. We understand from the whispers and rumours that she is going to fund her proposal from borrowing, while also giving big tax cuts to corporations. Well, in the end, that means working people will pay again for the costs of this, but let's see what she actually proposes tomorrow.
It would be that the more money they can hold on to, the more they can invest at a time when we're getting indications that, you know, we may have to start drilling in the North Sea again.
Well, look, they're making excess profits, and the reason they're making those profits is not because of any entrepreneurial decision they have made as such. It's not because of any particular investment decision. They're making those excess profits simply because of the turbulence in global energy markets. They are therefore ripe to have. They're making a windfall, so it's entirely logical in those circumstances that you should extend the windfall tax and use the proceeds of that tax yield to redistribute to working families. But as I say, this is all based on the speculation, the whispers, the rumours here in Whitehall. Let's actually see what she proposes tomorrow, and let's see if she actually does do something to help working people who are in the most desperate of circumstances.
What did you make of former Prime Minister Theresa May's intervention at Prime Minister's Question Time today? She congratulated Liz Truss on being the third female Conservative Prime Minister. And Liz Truss suggested that Labour can't even get away from their habit of just electing men from North London.
Well, I actually think Keir Starmer will be a very good Prime Minister for this country, and look, you know, I have supported our women candidates for Labour leader in the recent past. The last two leadership elections or so, I supported female candidates. But look, the key thing for me is, what is a Liz Truss government going to do? She's been in power now and a key part of this Tory administration for 12 years. She's been part of a government which has driven our NHS into the ground, and there are over 6 million people on a waiting list. She's part of a government which has seen incomes reduced. An average worker now, their weekly earnings on average is worth less in real terms than it was 12 years ago under the Labour government. I think that's a devastating verdict on 12 years of Tory economic failure, and she's been a central figure in 12 years of that Tory government.
I hope you can still hear us. Clearly there are some demonstrations going on down there at Parliament. But what did you make of the performance at PMQs? It's always a bit of theatre, and I suspect many people thought with Boris Johnson's departure it may become a bit more dull. It was still pretty feisty, wasn't it?
Well, PMQs is always a feisty moment. I mean, there were lots of Tory MPs here in the corridors of, the ones who didn't support Liz Truss. They are being so rude about her. It is unbelievable. They really have written her off, a whole bunch of these Tory MPs. They're probably the ones who supported Rishi Sunak. Look, we in the Labour Party, we treat Liz Truss obviously with respect, but in the end, I don't think what she's offering is going to resolve the issues facing families, working families who cannot feed their children, who cannot build a home because their wages have been so diminished by the ravages of inflation. I don't think Liz Truss has got any answers to the pensioners who have just seen the biggest real terms cut in their pension for 50 years. We don't need a change of faces at the top, we need a change of direction. I would say we need a Labour government to rebuild our economy, to get people back to work and to rebuild our National Health Service.
Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, thanks for joining us today. Thank you.
And as we say, with a rather noisy background there in Westminster with the demonstrations and the protests continue as we get a new government, of course.
Well, we've heard from Liam Halligan a short time ago on what might be expected from the new Prime Minister Liz Truss's energy support package, which is looking to be unveiled tomorrow.
But will that be enough for small businesses? As Liam indicated, they've been struggling with the soaring energy bills and other overheads as well. Let's hear now from Chris Noyce, Director of Communications at the Association of Convenience Stores, representing some 33,000 local shops across the UK. Chris, thanks for joining us. What is actually the problem that you've detected for most people? Is it business rates that they're having to face, or these energy bills where they're having to sort of keep their drinks chiller cabinets and fridges going and so on?
Well, the number one issue for all of our members is energy bills at the moment. There are lots of smaller businesses, lots of smaller retailers that don't have to pay any business rates at all because they get reliefs that are provided by the government. But there are every convenience retailer, whether they're large or small, is facing a huge increase in their energy bills to such an extent that I'm getting phone calls of retailers saying, look, depending on what's announced in the next couple of days, that will determine whether or not we can keep the lights on and whether we can keep trading.
Put this into sort of reality. Just give us an example of what our local corner shop, what sort of change in their energy bills have they seen this year? Let's just paint a picture for us.
Sure. So if you think of a reasonably small convenience store, 1,500, 2,000 square foot, quite similar to the kind of shop that I have behind me pictured here, that kind of business will have been paying around about 15 to 20 pence per kilowatt hour, which is about 15 to 20,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. So they'll be paying sort of 10 to 15,000 pounds a year. We've heard that stores are paying 3-4 times that now, and that is just, that not only eats into all of their profit, it eats into essentially their viability at source and makes it very difficult to run that business.
And as Liam was indicating, of course, that the issue is there's no cap as such on prices for businesses as there are for domestic customers. So what do you want to see from this plan tomorrow? Because clearly, if you're running a business, you need some kind of certainty for the next year, if not longer.
Yeah, well, certainty is really important. So our view is very much that small businesses, convenience stores and other small businesses have no real difference in the way they use energy to consumers. So whatever is announced for consumers, we hope that it will be pretty equivocal for small businesses as well. But larger businesses obviously facing significant issues as well. So we've called on the Chancellor to introduce a cap in the same way that we have for consumers. But if there's going to be something that is going further than that, then we hope the businesses are included as well. But as we say, all things are on the table at the moment, and we really look forward to what's being announced in the next 24 to 48 hours.
And when you make your call to ministers, when you lobby the government, making your pleas and giving that personal testimony that you've given to us, what sort of reception do you get? Do you have an inkling about what they might do, whether or not they get it?
I think they do get it. I'll be honest with you. I think they do get it. I think they really understand that this is a crisis affecting businesses as much as it is affecting consumers. And let's be clear, if local shops close, that has a huge impact on the communities that they serve. They are bedrocks of those communities, along with other businesses like pubs, restaurants, cafes. Local shops are hugely important to people's lives. So if they close their doors, that has a knock-on impact that will have a real problematic impact on people throughout the winter.
The other thing economists are pointing out, of course, as well, is that if the price cap comes in, that is likely to reduce inflation quite substantially. That's the other part of the equation, if you like. How damaging at the moment is this issue of inflation for you buying in the goods to sell at these corner shops?
Yeah, well, the way inflation is going at the moment, I think we haven't even hit the peak of what we're looking at. So retailers are telling us that they are doing everything they can to hold back increasing prices. If you imagine that with nothing happening on energy bills, if their costs are going up tens of thousands of pounds, really the only way they can recoup that is to increase prices, and customers will end up paying more. We don't want that. Customers don't want that. But if that happens, that will significantly drive inflation even higher. And as you say, yeah, negative impacts in the long term.
Chris Noyes from the Association of Convenience Stores, thank you for that. And of course, maybe we'll head back to you and see what your reaction is to what the details are announced tomorrow. But thanks very much for your time.
Great idea. Great idea. Let's do that. The time is 2:47. Ryan Giggs has said he is obviously disappointed that he is to face a retrial on domestic violence charges, but wants to clear his name.
Well, the former Manchester United footballer to be retried, we're now told, on the 31st of July next year. Paul Hawkins has the details for us.
Ryan Giggs will have been on bail for more than 2.5 years by the time of the retrial next summer. The new date follows a hearing which he didn't attend, nor was he required to, but it was revealed that the case had been discussed at a senior level by the Crown Prosecution Service. It follows the failure of jurors to reach a verdict following more than 20 hours of deliberations at the end of the 4-week trial. The 48-year-old former Manchester United winger denies controlling or coercive behaviour towards his ex-girlfriend Kate Greville. He also denies losing control and headbutting her and assaulting her sister Emma by elbowing her in the jaw during a row at his home in Worsley in Greater Manchester on the 1st of November 2020. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Paul Hawkins reporting there. Now, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has this week announced a rent freeze for public and private rented properties as part of efforts to help people struggling with rising bills.
Well, the First Minister said that this cost of living crisis was a humanitarian emergency which could cost lives. She's also written to Liz Truss asking her to convene a 4-nation meeting of political leaders to discuss further help to help households.
Joining us now is the Global Communications Director of the flat and house share website Spare Room, Matt Hutchinson. Welcome to the programme, Matt. What's not to like?
I mean, it's going to be incredibly welcome news for renters. I think it's already been incredibly unwelcome news for landlords, and the difficulty we have is right now at this point in time, demand for rooms is through the roof and supply is very, very limited. And so, you know, landlords are obviously worried about that, but renters will be rubbing their hands with glee. I think the main issue really is that it's a very short-term fix for what is a very long-term problem. Even if we cap rents now, they're already way higher than a lot of people can afford. And some sort of long-term strategy to bring them down is what we need more than anything.
And have the landlords been profiteering, or is it just because of the cost pressures that they're facing as well to actually provide gas, electricity and all the other sort of services?
There's always a bit of both. There are always some people who will put their prices up because the market will support that.
Yeah,
and there are people who put prices up because their costs go up, you know, with interest rates going up. The cost of materials and labour for renovating properties.
If you can get hold of the workmen, I guess, to even do it.
So there are genuine concerns from landlords, but as always, some people do put their rents up simply because they can achieve those rents.
And you said that there was a need for a long-term strategy rather than what you're suggesting is a blunt instrument. What might that look like?
I mean, there's sort of two levels of that. One is the government has gradually been squeezing the smaller buy-to-let landlords out of the market in the hope that some sort of institutional investment will come in that will be a longer-term solution, but that doesn't seem to have happened. But really, I think the issue stems back a few decades in that we tend to give people money to afford things rather than making things affordable. So we're giving people housing benefit, we're putting money into Help to Buy schemes, we're doing things that help people afford expensive rents, expensive homes, rather than doing things that will make homes affordable for everybody.
What about the dynamic where we were seeing this coming from Scotland? I mean, we know for Edinburgh, for instance, so many properties taken off the market because they're going into Airbnb and holiday lets and all the sort of issues about staycations, which is great if you want to go and have a city break in Edinburgh, but it's not great for those people living in the city trying to get hold of accommodation.
Yeah, and that's been a sort of issue through tourist hotspots in the UK for the last 10, 20 years. You know, areas in North Yorkshire, parts of Cornwall, people, particularly young people, struggle to stay in the area they were born and grew up in, and it's a real issue.
And to what extent are high rents a city problem? But once you get to the towns, sort of the areas that I used to live in and represent, that actually rents are quite affordable there?
I mean, just over the second quarter of this year compared to the year before, rents rose across the board, and 40 out of the 50 biggest towns and cities in the UK are seeing record high rents right now. So, affordability is relative to where you live and what you earn, but it's still an issue for everybody.
OK. Matt Hutchinson from Spring Room.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's go back to our top story this hour.
Yes, Liz Truss been chairing her first cabinet meeting this morning, and then PMQs alongside Keir Starmer, and on the front bench with her, Commons front bench, Kwasi Kwarteng, who's now in charge of public finances, the new Chancellor, of course, and he's got that job of tackling soaring inflation alongside the Bank of England.
While the cost of living crisis and energy bills will be high on the new Prime Minister's list of priorities, the small boats crisis in the Channel, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and staying on top of the threat posed by China will all be key concerns.
Now, James Cleverly is responsible for representing the UK on the world stage as the new Foreign Secretary. Suella Braverman dealing with immigration with her job at the Home Office as new Home Secretary. But Ben Wallace is actually staying put at Defence, some continuity there at least.
Well, let's speak to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, now, who can talk to us about those Cabinet appointees. But firstly, Mark, can we ask about the breaking news that you have for us?
Yes, a video that we've obtained that was posted on social media today on the TikTok channel, effectively appearing to show a small boat in the English Channel getting into difficulties. We're not sure whether the engine broke down, but it's clearly swamped with water, waterlogged. You can see there are 2 rows of young men sitting on either side of this inflatable. There's writing on the screen as well to accompany this TikTok video. That writing is in Albanian that says these people have got into difficulties heading to the UK. God save them, it says as well, the translation from Albanian. Now, we don't know what fate these people have suffered after clearly being in that boat and waterlogged, whether they actually made it to UK waters, whether they turned back to France, were rescued by either French or UK authorities. If we do find out that, we will let you know. But clearly, it illustrates, I think, some real concerns that we were hearing from sources yesterday, official sources saying that Albanian criminal gangs in particular are taking increasing risks and are pushing these small boats out into the English Channel in weather conditions that are just not suitable. It's never really suitable to put upwards of 40, 50 people on a dinghy anyway and send them into one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. But when the weather conditions are poor, like they were yesterday with 30-mile-an-hour winds, similar today, winds that are churning up the waves in the Channel, then clearly there is a real potential for something to go badly wrong, as it did, of course, on the 24th of November last year when 27 people drowned after their small boat capsized.
And therefore, Mark, a matter of some urgency for Suella Braverman as the new Home Secretary, has how she tackles this. I mean, we're looking at the border force having been used, then the Royal Navy being used, but as you were indicating earlier, that will be coming to a stop into next spring.
Yes, that's right. You all, of course, remember with big fanfare the announcement by our now previous Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the previous Home Secretary Priti Patel back in April at Lydd Airport in Kent, where the Prime Minister was announcing this new deal with Rwanda. Priti Patel was across in Rwanda. In addition to that, Boris Johnson announced that the Royal Navy would take over command and control in the Channel, and that they would be opening this big accommodation centre at the old RAF base at Linton-on-Ouse. All 3 planks of this strategy are now in disarray. The Royal Navy is going to stop command and control in the Channel come the new year. The Linton-on-Ouse plans, well, they've now been abandoned after huge public outcry, understandably, in that village of just some 500 people, with some 1,200 asylum seekers that were going to be housed in that village. And then the Rwanda policy, well, that is currently stuck in legal challenges at the High Court, a judicial review at the moment, another challenge due in October. So Suella Braverman is going to have her work cut out coming up with a way forward to try to get to grips with what is a growing crisis.
Mark, as ever, thank you very much for updating us on that story with all those latest pictures coming in as well. But, of course, we'll keep people updated on what's happening across the Channel. For the moment, thanks very much.
And that's it from us for today. Join us for GB Newsday at the same time tomorrow, midday till 3.
Well, GB News Live coming up with Patrick, but before that, let's get the latest weather for you.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. We're looking at another day of sunshine and showers. Some of these will be heavy at times, and this continues over the next few days. And the reason for this is low pressure continues to be in charge of our weather. This system hasn't gone anywhere very quickly, bringing showers spiralling around the system, and this continues to be the case over the next couple of days too. Through the rest of Wednesday, a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers to end the day. Some of these will be heavy, thundery at times, perhaps during the early hours merging to give some longer spells of rain across